If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1. Oi, madam, you don't want your son to be bullied at the Ninja Academy, right? Konoha Year 52. It has been a year since the Nine Tails attack. The wounds left by the demon fox are slowly healing, and the village is gradually regaining its former liveliness. Madam, you don't want your child to be bullied at the Ninja Academy, do you? In the bustling commercial district, in front of a dango shop. The shop owner, Saiba Mieko, stared in disbelief at the little boy before her. He had black hair, black eyes, delicate features, and was as adorable as an exquisitely crafted doll. She couldn't believe such threatening words had come from his mouth. The young woman forced a smile. Little one, if you don't have money, it's okay. Just go home, bring it next time, and... Before she could finish, a chubby little boy ran out from the back room, crying and begging her not to take the money. Mieko instantly realized the child's words were not empty threats. In the end, at her son's request, not only did she waive the payment for the dango, but she also added a few extra sticks of 3-colored dango. The little boy smiled in satisfaction. Auntie, you're quite understanding. Don't worry, I'll take care of your son at school from now on. My name is Shimura Yami. With that, the little boy turned and left, carrying the takeout box as he disappeared into the crowd. Mieko stood frozen for a long while before anxiously looking at her son, who let out a relieved sigh. Taro, has that kid been bullying you at school? The boy, Saiba Taro, weakly shook his head. No. No. But Shimura Yami is the grandson of the Hokage's advisor. Anyone who offends him has a miserable time. Taro shuddered as he recalled those classmates who had been beaten so badly they couldn't attend school for a whole week. It was terrifying. Not only did the teachers refrain from punishing Yami, but they even praised his combat skills. If Mom had taken the money today, wouldn't he have been the next one to be beaten? Hokage's advisor. Mieko was stunned. That's a high-ranking official. Shimura, no wonder. Even though she wasn't a ninja, Mieko knew that this was a powerful clan in the village. Shimura Yami. Mieko silently committed the name to memory. For the sake of her son's well-being and their livelihood in the village, she decided that as long as Shimura Yami visited her shop, she wouldn't charge him a single ryo. At the same time. Ding! Congratulations! You have established a fear bond with Saiba Mieko and Saiba Taro. Reward, Grandmaster of Dango making and 0.1 standard unit Genin Chakra. A system prompt echoed in Shimura Yami's mind. Seeing the reward, the corner of his mouth twitched. This system is seriously unreliable. Shimura Yami was a reincarnator, someone who had traveled to this world, a world of the 5 great shinobi villages' struggle for supremacy. The first thing he saw after being born was a woman giving him a gentle smile before closing her eyes forever. His father had died in battle while his mother was still pregnant with him. The classic orphaned protagonist setup. But unlike others, he had something else, a grandfather named Shimura Danzō. In this world, almost every major villain had their share of devoted apologists. Uchiha Obito, the obsessive simp. Uchiha Madara, the unstoppable warlord. Even those who slaughtered their own kin and took on 7 opponents alone were glorified. But Shimura Danzō? Not only did no one defend him, but even those who excused other villains blamed everything on him instead. The title Nabecage was well deserved. To be honest, when Yami first learned his identity, his future looked bleak. But after a few days of pondering in his nanny's arms, he had a change of heart. Actually, it's not that bad. Compared to many other reincarnators who landed in the Naruto world, his starting position was decent. Look at all the talented prodigies, sooner or later, Danzō would set his sights on them. But him? As long as he survived any potential assassinations from enemy villages, his childhood would be smooth sailing. And by the time the main plot began, if he avoided the front lines of the 4th Great Ninja War, he could safely coast through it. Heck, he could even enjoy a blissful dream inside the infinite Tsukuyomi while the world sorted itself out. As for facing consequences? Impossible. As a classic shonen protagonist, neither Naruto nor Sasuke would hold a grudge against him for Danzō's actions. Life's good. Once he realized this, Yami stopped worrying and embraced his role as the eldest son of the Shimura clan. After all, Konoha might be led by Sarutobi Hiruzen, but face mattered to him. Danzō, on the other hand, wasn't Hokage, he had no such concerns. Because of this, while Sarutobi Asuma was strictly disciplined and often clashed with his father, Yami enjoyed the privileges of being the village's #1 second-generation heir. Even Konohamaru's future antics wouldn't compare to his status. And of course, being a reincarnator came with perks. Ever since birth, he had a progress bar in his mind. Then, 3 days ago, on his 6th birthday, his system finally activated. The strongest shinobi bond system. By establishing a bond with someone, he could extract a unique trait from them as a reward. These traits could be chakra nature affinities, innate talents, chakra reserves, mastery over a specific jutsu. The depth of the bond and the strength of the other person determined the quality of the rewards. For instance, just now, he had exchanged names with the dango shop owner and left a deep impression, successfully forming a bond. If he strengthened this connection, he could earn additional rewards. However, seeing the Grandmaster of Dango making skill he just received, Yami immediately lost interest in pursuing a deeper relationship with the shopkeeper. "Young master, it's time for your training." A man with a faint presence, wearing sunglasses, suddenly appeared behind him. Despite the bustling crowd, no one even glanced his way. Abarame Seiji, a root shinobi, with the rank of Takebutsu Jainin, assigned as Yami's personal bodyguard. He also had a partner, Yamanaka Ryo, who remained hidden at all times. Even now, Yami had never managed to spot him. "Got it." Yami responded lazily before spotting another shop run by a classmate's family. Using the same tactic, he established 2 more bonds and walked away with a bag of round fans. Introduction to round fan crafting, standard Genin Chakra plus 0.1. Satisfied, he left the commercial district and returned to the Shimura clan's estate. Chapter 2, System Panel, The Legacy Left by Parents. Young Master Yami, today we will focus on chakra extraction training. In the courtyard of a wooden house, Yami listened attentively as his tutor, Ebiki, explained the techniques and key points of chakra extraction. What is a Takebutsu Jainin? They are shinobi whose abilities fall between Chunin and Jainin. Those promoted to Jainin due to exceptional talent in a specialized field are classified as Takebutsu Jainin. Ebiki was one such ninja, rising to his rank due to his expertise and education. His knowledge and teaching experience in chakra extraction far exceeded that of the instructors at the Ninja Academy. At this stage, the gap between clan-born shinobi and civilian shinobi was already becoming apparent. With the same physical fitness and mental energy, clan-born shinobi could extract chakra more efficiently. They not only had a larger chakra reserve but also a faster recovery rate compared to ordinary shinobi. Civilians had no choice but to rely on their intelligence to compete against the power of established clans. To become stronger, they had to find skilled mentors. However, top-tier mentors were almost always from prestigious ninja clans. Over time, this divide naturally formed factions within the shinobi world. Although Yami had both a cheat-like ability and a powerful family background, he never slacked off in his training. In fact, he trained even harder than most. At the end of the day, this was a world where strength determined everything. Without power, even if others showed him respect, it would only be superficial or worse, out of fear. In his past life, he had been just an ordinary person. Now that he had the resources, he wanted to fight for his own destined future. That said, he only started training seriously at the age of 5. Chakra was a form of energy created by extracting the life force within cells and mixing it with mental energy in a precise ratio. Overexerting oneself at a young age wasn't always beneficial. Sometimes, restraint was necessary. The 2-hour lesson passed quickly. After exchanging bows as a sign of gratitude, Ebiki took his leave. He was very satisfied with Yami as a student. Not only was Yami the grandson of Danzō, an influential figure comparable to the Hokage himself, but more importantly, he was intelligent and quick to grasp concepts. Unlike other young shinobi, who required constant emotional management, teaching Yami never felt like babysitting. Meanwhile, Yami returned to his room. A servant soon arrived, bringing his dinner along with a prepared nutritional herbal tonic. Frowning slightly, he downed the bitter medicine in one gulp before starting his meal. From a scientific perspective, the number of times a cell could divide in a lifetime was limited. Using chakra in battle essentially meant burning through that limit faster. However, even without chakra extraction, cellular division continued as usual. In most cases, aging and death were caused by organ failure rather than hitting the absolute limit of cell replication. As long as chakra usage was controlled and proper self-care was maintained, normal battles wouldn't significantly impact lifespan. This was something Yami had learned from his grandfather, Shimura Danzō. The old man was getting up in years, but his ambition remained strong. Even now, he still dreamed of becoming Hokage, which made him obsessively invested in health maintenance. If it were anyone else, it would have been an inspiring tale of an old man chasing his dreams. But unfortunately, after dinner, Yami returned to his quarters. He had no idea what his grandfather had been up to lately. The old man hadn't appeared in the past few days. Aside from the servants and guards, Yami was the only one living in this massive estate. Lying on his bed, he activated the system panel with a thought and switched to his personal attributes page. Status panel. Name, Shimura Yami. Gender, male. Age, 6 years old. Date of birth, April 1st, year 46, Konoha calendar. Chakra attributes, fire, genius, wind, genius, yang, excellent. Total chakra, 6.1 standard genin units. Chakra control talent, genius. Mastered ninjutsu, 3 basic technique, proficient, wind release, great breakthrough, normal, fire release, great fireball, normal. Nature transformation, none. Special talents, father's expectations, mother's love, senju bloodline, thin, underdevelopment, swordsmanship genius, stealth, dango making, round fan making. Strength evaluation, the schoolyard bully, you're the one who does the bullying, and no one dares mess with you. For someone with a cheat system, this panel wasn't impressive. However, considering that he had only unlocked the system a few days ago, and aside from 1 standard genin unit of chakra obtained through the system, everything else had been earned through his own efforts, this progress was quite good. For a 6-year-old, he had already reached the graduation standard. The system categorized attributes and ninjutsu mastery into different levels. Talent ranks, ordinary good excellent genius ultimate limit break. Ninjutsu proficiency, beginner normal proficient mastery ultimate limit break. A genius level talent was on par with Hatake Kakashi, one of Konoha's brightest young prodigies. An ultimate talent was at the level of the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the so-called professor of ninjutsu. Judging from his current panel, Yami's future potential capped at elite genin. With great effort, he might barely touch cage level strength. But then, his eyes locked onto the first 2 talents in the special talents section. And he froze. Father's expectations. Your deceased father, whom you have never met, had high expectations for you. Effect, all existing attribute talents are upgraded by 1 level. Mother's love. A mother's love is the greatest gift in the world. Before passing away, she left you her most precious blessing. This talent is divided into 3 stages. 1 Stage 1, unlocks the senju bloodline from your maternal lineage. Develops automatically with age, effect expires upon adulthood. 2 Stage 2, after officially becoming a shinobi, all talents increase by 1 level, upper limits can be broken, certain special talents are unaffected. 3 Stage 3, upon reaching adulthood, 16 years old, you will continue to receive your mother's blessing, your chakra reserves will double. Parental love. Yami thought back to the gentle woman he had only met once. His feelings were complicated. He knew that his mother was from the Senju clan. Back in the day, Senju Tobirama had encouraged marriages between the Senju clan and both civilian ninjas and other ninja clans. Though this weakened their short-term military strength, it greatly increased the likelihood of producing talented civilian-born shinobi. However, awakening the Senju bloodline was no simple matter. His mother had left him the greatest gift she could. She had filled in the missing novice package that the system never provided. Chapter 3, The 5.5th Hokage. The next day. Since today was a day off, Yami slept in, not getting up until noon. Ebiki wouldn't be coming today, but that didn't mean Yami planned to slack off. Going into the village to establish new bonds was too inefficient, it was better to train at home. The system required 3 conditions for a bond to form. 1. Both parties must meet face to face. 2. Both parties must know each other's names. 3. Yami must leave a deep impression on the other party. So far, only the rewards left by his parents had been exceptions to these rules. Right now, in the eyes of adults, Yami was just a child, not worth taking seriously. Meeting the 3rd condition was still difficult. Otherwise, his two personal guards, Abarame Seiji and Yamanaka Ryo, would have already provided a bond. To them, Yami was simply a mission objective, not someone significant. Currently, the best place to gain rewards was still the Ninja Academy. For example, he had obtained his fire release affinity from a classmate. If he was lucky, he might one day acquire all 5 chakra natures and even the yin release affinity. Yami stepped into the courtyard, picking up a child-sized dagger that had been specially crafted for him. He began practicing the most basic slashes. In this world, swords and knives weren't strictly differentiated. However, in Yami's eyes, they were all just blades, even the so-called Kusanagi sword was still a knife to him. That said, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He wouldn't argue over trivial naming conventions. With his swordsmanship talent, he would be able to reach the ultimate level once he became a genin. It would be a waste not to train diligently. No matter how strong a shinobi was, most were still mortals. A sword could kill just as efficiently as ninjutsu, if not more. Most ninjas didn't know many jutsu, so they relied primarily on taijutsu and ninja tools in battle. Jutsu were used to gain an advantage or secure a one-hit kill. Do you really think everyone could throw raise-nans around like they were basic attacks? Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of swinging steel echoed through the courtyard as the warm sunlight shone down, glistening off the beads of sweat on Yami's forehead. His training continued from after lunch until sunset, only stopping when a deep voice called out from behind him. Yami! Yami turned around to see a tall, wrinkled old man standing there. A bandage covered his left eye, and his face bore a gloomy, cold aura. Yet, when he looked at Yami, he smiled. It was a stiff smile, likely because he wasn't used to smiling at all. This man was Shimura Danzō. The darkness of the shinobi world. The 5.5th Hokage. The strongest Nabekage in history. Old man, you're back. Yami greeted him casually. Since he had learned to talk, he had always called Danzō old man, never once addressing him as grandfather. Danzō didn't mind. Or rather, caring wouldn't change anything. He could be ruthless to outsiders, plotting against anyone. But Yami was his only remaining family. His sole blood relative. And the key to his ambitions. Not only did Danzō want Yami to inherit root, but he also hoped Yami would one day become Hokage. And based on Yami's current talent, he was not disappointed. His growth was nearly identical to Kakashi's, having already reached the graduation standard not long after enrolling in the Ninja Academy. If only, he had a Kekki-eye Genkai. Danzō's visible eye dimmed. No matter how strong an ordinary shinobi was, there was always a limit. Only Sharingan or wood release could allow Yami and by extension, himself to surpass those limits. Just as Yami greeted Danzō, 2 system prompts rang in his mind. Bond established with Shimura Danzō. Reward acquired, wind release affinity, genius, ... Bond with Shimura Danzō strengthened to stage 2. Reward acquired, wind release nature transformation, mastery, ... This was the first time Yami had met Danzō since activating the system, so it made sense that the rewards had only triggered now. The 2 rewards merged, subtly altering Yami's aura, making it sharper and more fierce. Especially the wind release nature transformation. Danzō was arguably Konoha's strongest wind release user, and even among the entire ninja world, he was one of the best. After all, not just anyone could cut through Susanoo using wind-infused shuriken. Danzō noticed the change in Yami and snapped out of his thoughts. He slowly walked into the courtyard and stood in the open training space. I have time today. I haven't checked your progress in a while. Show me what you've learned. Hey? Oh. Yami tightened his grip on the short sword and rushed forward without hesitation. A faint aura of compressed air swirled around his blade. Danzō's single eye gleamed with interest. Nature transformation. Good, very good. Mastering nature transformation at age 6? My grandson truly has the makings of a Hokage. In an instant, Yami closed the distance and slashed downward with his short sword. Danzō tilted his body slightly, dodging with ease. Yami immediately followed up with a spinning kick. Danzō raised his arm to block, using the impact to push Yami back slightly. But before he could reset his stance, Yami had already closed in again. Of course, Danzō was an elite genin at minimum. Even if Yami went all out, he was no threat to him. But Yami wasn't holding back. He unleashed his full strength, using every bit of his swordsmanship and ninjutsu. After all, the one person least likely to harm him in this world was Shimura Danzō. 15 minutes later. Yami finally stopped, breathing heavily, his chakra reserves nearly depleted. Danzō, on the other hand, remained completely unscathed. Well done, Yami. But don't let it get to your head. You're just a genius, not a true powerhouse. Danzō's stiff smile finally turned into a genuine grin. Yami's progress far exceeded his expectations. His wind release nature transformation was already highly refined. His fire release jutsu were also well executed. If only he had the right eyes. If that happened, Konoha's future would belong to the Shimura clan. Thinking this, Danzō felt even more satisfied and led Yami back inside. During dinner, halfway through the meal, Yami suddenly looked up and asked, "Old man, you seemed pissed off when you came back. Who pissed you off?" Danzō casually took a bite of rice. "Who else? That old fool, Sarutobi Hiruzen. I failed to assassinate him today, so my Hokage plans are delayed again." Yami. Chapter 4, Terrifying Bond of Danzō and Hiruzen. After listening to Danzō's explanation, Yami finally understood the situation. It turned out that Danzō had disappeared for a while because he was secretly planning to assassinate the Hokage. After the Nine Tails Rebellion, the youngest and most brilliant fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, had perished. The third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, once again took charge of Konoha and had no intention of selecting a new Hokage. By procedure, a Hokage must meet with the daimyo and receive official approval. However, due to the attack on Konoha, the village was in ruins, and Sarutobi Hiruzen had delayed his journey to the Land of Fire's capital. Only recently had he begun to arrange the visit. Danzō received this news early and mobilized all of Root's forces to assassinate the third Hokage today. Good news, the assassination succeeded. Bad news, the Hokage they killed was actually a disguise. The real Sarutobi Hiruzen had already seen through Danzō's scheme. Just as Danzō was savoring his victory on the Hokage's throne, Hiruzen suddenly appeared and scared the life out of him. Though Hiruzen didn't punish him, his calm and condescending tone had deeply wounded Danzō's pride. And to make matters worse, he had finally found a shinobi with wood release, but Hiruzen had lured him away. Even now, just recalling it made Danzō curse in frustration. He was so angry that he even scolded Sarutobi Biwako, who had already passed away. Yami felt speechless. "Old man, don't push your luck. If someone else had attempted to assassinate the Hokage, they'd have been executed on the spot. The third Hokage has already been generous by not stripping you of your position as Root's leader. Does he even have the power to do that?" Dan sneered coldly, an unmistakable arrogance in his expression. "Root is technically part of Anbu, but Hiruzen has no real authority over it. Even if I were officially removed, my subordinates would still follow me. This is what it means to be a proper tool." "Then don't get yourself killed," Yami scoffed. "I'm still a student at the Ninja Academy, that's his territory. He won't touch you." Danzō's voice was firm. "It's just an assassination. It's not like this was my first attempt in the past few decades. When he first became Hokage, I tried to assassinate him once. Later, I attempted to assassinate the fourth Hokage too. What kind of twisted relationship was this?" Listening to his grandfather recount his glorious history, Yami had no idea what kind of expression to make. The power of bonds was truly terrifying. For anyone else, assassinating the Hokage would be a life or death matter. But for Danzō, it was just another way to strengthen his friendship with Hiruzen. Forget it. He didn't want to get involved in the feud between these two old men. As long as it didn't affect him, he didn't care. After dinner, Yami returned to his room to refine his chakra, while Danzō headed back to Root's base. Tapping the ground lightly with his cane, two masked Root ninjas immediately appeared, kneeling on one knee behind him. Danzō remained silent for a moment, deep in thought, before issuing his command in a cold voice. "Gather as much swordsmanship knowledge as possible from Konoha and other ninja villages. Organize and compile it. Instruct our contacts in Kirigakure to see if they can acquire a sword from the 7 ninja swordsmen." "Understood." One of the ninjas responded and swiftly retreated. Danzō then turned to the remaining operative. "What has Orochimaru been up to lately?" "Orochimaru entered his lab half a month ago and hasn't emerged since. Either that, or our surveillance capabilities weren't sufficient to track him." Danzō snorted but didn't reprimand the subordinate. Expecting his men to monitor Orochimaru was unrealistic. The man was the most unpredictable of the three Sunin, and after the other two left the village, his personality had shifted drastically. Right now, their relationship was a delicate cooperation, but Danzō had already decided, he would expose Orochimaru's experiments and force him to flee Konoha. After all, conducting human experiments on his own villagers, not even Hiruzen could cover that up. But before that, Danzō planned to squeeze every last bit of value out of him. Since Yami had a talent for swordsmanship, as his grandfather, it was only natural that he provided the best possible conditions for him. But swordsmanship alone wasn't enough, he needed a famous blade to match it. The first choice was the Sword of the Thunder God, once wielded by Senju Tobirama. Unfortunately, it was now in Hiruzen's possession, making it difficult to obtain. Then, there was Orochimaru's Kusanagi sword. The Kusanagi wasn't a single blade, but a category of legendary swords. Rumor had it that Orochimaru possessed more than one. Danzō was definitely interested. "Let's go," he said as he slowly walked out of Root's base. His movements were slow and deliberate, like an old man past his prime. "Prepare a meeting with Orochimaru. I still owe Yami a 6th birthday present." Time passed in the blink of an eye, and it was another school day. With his backpack slung over his shoulders, Yami walked toward the Ninja Academy. The Shimura clan estate was located outside Konoha's center. Along the way, many clan members greeted him with respect. As he returned their greetings, the system notifications popped up. 0.1 Standard Chunin Chakra. 0.2 Standard Chunin Chakra. The power of the system was slowly becoming evident. 1 Standard Chunin Chakra unit was equivalent to 10 regular genin. By the time Yami left the clan compound, his total chakra had already reached 1.3 Standard Chunin units. Along with that, he had obtained several additional wind release talents. The system allowed for talent fusion, but since the quality was too low and the number was insufficient, his wind release talent hadn't yet advanced to ultimate level. Even so, it had clearly improved. Upon arriving at the Ninja Academy, several students saw Yami and immediately paled, their expressions filled with fear. Some of them looked as if they were about to cry. Yami barely spared them a glance, walking straight into the classroom and settling into his usual seat by the window. These were the same students who had mocked him for being an orphan because no one came to pick him up. After hearing those insults, Yami had beaten them senseless. They had taken over a week to recover before returning to class. Was the revenge over? Of course not. As long as their parents were ninja, they wouldn't survive this year. They would inevitably die gloriously on the battlefield. By then, they would experience firsthand what it meant to be an orphan. If their parents weren't ninja, well, dealing with them would be even easier. Just as Yami was absent-mindedly watching sparrows on a tree branch, a cheerful voice called out to him. "Yami!" A lively girl with long black hair ran into the classroom. The moment she spotted him, her eyes lit up, and she immediately rushed over to sit beside him. Yami smiled and reached out to ruffle her hair. Chapter 5, Uchiha Izumi. Uchiha Izumi, a girl who truly lived up to her name. She had a gentle personality like a spring breeze, a voice as soft as flowing water, long black hair, and a teardrop-shaped mole at the corner of her eye. One day, she would undoubtedly grow into a rare beauty. She was also Yami's childhood friend, whom he had met the previous year. He had witnessed the Nine Tails rebellion firsthand. The colossal fox, towering like a mountain, had rampaged outside the village, leaving destruction in its wake. At the time, Yami had been escorted to an underground shelter by several guards, where he happened to encounter a panicked Uchiha Izumi. Naturally, he had stopped the little black-haired girl in her tracks. Originally, Yami had only possessed a wind affinity and a latent yang attribute. His current fire affinity had come from Izumi. "Yami." Izumi's face was flushed, her voice tinged with grievance. "What were you doing over the break? Why didn't you come to see me?" "I was busy training, Izumi." Yami sighed dramatically, then shifted his gaze to the figure who had entered the room alongside her. "After all, there's a genius like Uchiha Itachi in our class. I have to work hard so I don't bring shame to the Shimura clan." The one who had come in with Izumi was none other than Uchiha Itachi, the ninja world's most devoted filial son. There were many orphans in the shinobi world, but Uchiha Itachi was unique in how he actively made himself one. Yami had to respect the dedication. "You're a genius too, Yami." Izumi quickly encouraged him, her tone full of admiration. She wasn't wrong. Before Itachi awakened his Sharingan, Yami might have even been stronger than him. But after unlocking his eyes, Itaka had become a cheat, skyrocketing to cage level in just a few years. Uchiha Itaka frowned slightly. He had always sensed a certain hostility from Shimura Yami. Disdain toward the Uchiha clan was common, especially after the Nine Tails attack. Many people had seen the Sharingan reflected in the beast's eyes, further fueling their suspicion. But Yami was different. His hostility seemed directed at Itaka alone rather than the entire Uchiha clan. Otherwise, he wouldn't get along so well with Izumi. You're not inferior to me in strength, Shimura. We should both continue to work hard and contribute to the village as soon as possible. Itaka paused briefly before offering these polite words and continuing on his way. Yami watched his retreating figure, unable to determine whether it was the real Itaka or just a shadow clone. He felt the urge to test it. Yami, what are you looking at? Izumi asked curiously. Nothing. Yami turned back to her with a smile. I wasn't able to spend time with you last weekend. How about we go fishing together next week? Izumi's eyes immediately brightened, her attention successfully diverted. Where should we go? How about the river in Training Ground 35? The scenery there is really nice. I'll leave it up to you, Yami replied with a grin. Danzō didn't particularly like his close relationship with Uchiha Izumi. They had even argued over it before. But since Yami insisted, Danzō had refrained from using any underhanded methods to interfere. Perhaps, in his eyes, a marginal Uchiha like Izumi was insignificant, someone harmless who couldn't affect the grand scheme of things. Even so, he never missed an opportunity to indoctrinate Yami with the belief that the Uchiha clan was inherently evil. Yami had long grown tired of hearing it. Not long after, the school bell rang, and their homeroom teacher, Kazama Shoki, walked in. All right, class. Today, we'll be learning how to throw ninja tools. Kazama Shoki wasted no time with pointless lectures or propaganda. Unlike in the future, where the academy's curriculum shamelessly brainwashed students into believing that the third Hokage was the strongest in history, the current era was still a time of war. Minato Namikaze's ascension to Hokage in Konoha year 50 had only marked the end of large-scale battles. In reality, aside from the utterly defeated Tsunagakuer, the other villages had never truly stopped fighting. Although outright wars had ceased, small-scale skirmishes remained constant, keeping the shinobi world in a state of tension. These students were future military assets, so there was no time for empty rhetoric. The instructors focused on teaching real combat knowledge and survival skills. Kazama Shoki scribbled formulas on the blackboard, breaking down the parabolic trajectories of thrown weapons while explaining various shuriken throwing techniques. The first class was all theory. The second was a practical session, also taught by Shoki. Yami led his classmates out of the classroom toward the training grounds for their hands-on practice. Since there weren't enough targets for everyone, the students paired up. Naturally, Yami was partnered with Izumi. Itaka, on the other hand, was paired with some random classmate. He picked up 3 shuriken and casually flicked them forward. Clang! The projectiles collided mid-air, ricocheting off each other before embedding into the bullseye in a strangely precise pattern, causing a wave of admiration from the students. Amazing! He hit all 3. As expected of an Uchiha. He's so strong. Itaka is so cool. Who should I pick, him or Yami? You? Please. You've been eating too much candy lately. I can't let you get carried away. Who's going to knock some sense into her? Izumi ignored the chatter, focusing on her own technique. Though she didn't show off like Itaka, she still landed her shuriken perfectly in the red circle at the center. Not bad, Izumi. Yami praised her sincerely. The little girl beamed with delight and stepped aside. You're even better than me, Yami. That's right. Watch closely. Yami smiled as he retrieved a shuriken from his pouch. Their instructor, Kazama Shoki, also turned his attention toward him. Shimura Yami and Uchiha Itaka were considered the top 2 geniuses in their class, both hailing from prestigious clans. Itaka had just demonstrated his impressive skill. Now, it was Yami's turn. 1 second later. Boom! Several targets suddenly exploded, sending students into a panic. Kazama Shoki's eyes bulged in shock. Why was there an explosive tag on your shuriken? He had seen it clearly, Yami's shuriken had barely grazed the target, but the explosive tag attached to it had detonated, destroying several nearby targets in the process. Yami looked completely unfazed. It increases the margin for error, If I miss my target, the explosive tag still ensures I hit something. He turned to Shoki, his expression calm. So? Did it hit or not? Kazama Shoki. Chapter 6, The Big Fat Sheep. Shimura, the purpose of the shuriken training class is to improve your throwing accuracy. Wouldn't it be meaningless to use explosive tags? Even though Yami's background wasn't simple, Kazama Shoki still couldn't help but lecture him. The cost of an explosive tag was around 300 RY, and during wartime, the price would rise due to material shortages. 300 RY could buy 3 bowls of Ichiraku ramen, not exactly a small amount. Most shinobi only carried a few hundred RY when they went on missions. Equipping each shuriken with an explosive tag would be far too extravagant. The mission rewards wouldn't even cover the expenses. Yami waved his hand dismissively. Sensei, as long as I achieve my goal, does it matter how I do it? It's just an explosive tag. I can afford tens of thousands of them. Kazama Shoki was momentarily speechless. Host establishes a bond with Kazama Shoki. I have a rich student reward, Earth Release Chakra, good. Host establishes a fear bond with classmate A reward, 0.1 Standard Genin Chakra. Host achieves a speechless bond with classmate B reward, Swordsmanship Talent, normal. The system notifications rang one after another, and Yami narrowed his eyes in amusement. Of course, he had already mastered shuriken throwing. It could even be considered one of his better skills. But in order to grow stronger and leave a lasting impression, Yami had to do something unexpected. By now, he had almost completed all the first stage bond achievements in class. Except for one. Yami glanced at Itaki, who remained expressionless, and narrowed his eyes slightly. As expected of Itaki, the boy who started contemplating the meaning of life at 4 years old. His emotions were remarkably stable. In the blink of an eye, school was over. Yami, Izumi, and Itaki walked out of the academy together. At Izumi's invitation, Yami was heading to her house for dinner. The two chatted and laughed along the way, completely ignoring Itaki, who was walking silently beside them. Yami was well aware of Itaki's family situation. It wasn't exactly ideal. Izumi's father had been an outsider, a foreign shinobi who had married into the Uchiha clan. He had died protecting her during the Nine Tails attack. Her mother was just an ordinary Uchiha, with only Chunin-level strength, and she hadn't even awakened the Sharingan. Clans like Uchiha and Hokage placed great importance on preserving their bloodlines, leading to frequent intermarriages. If Izumi's father hadn't married into the family, there would have been no possibility between them at all. Even so, their family still wasn't well received by the other Uchiha, often facing exclusion. Stop right there. This is Uchiha territory, outsiders are not allowed to enter. 2 Uchiha guards stood at the entrance like gatekeepers, blocking Yami and Izumi with arrogant expressions, as if they were the rulers of the world. There were reasons why the Uchiha clan had a bad reputation. Beyond the fear and schemes of the higher UPS, the Uchiha themselves contributed to the issue. They looked down on others as if the rest of Konoha were beneath them. Who would like people like that? Senpai, Yami is my friend, Izumi quickly explained, but the 2 guards simply shook their heads coldly. Rules are rules. He can't enter. You can go in by yourself. Yami chuckled. If someone knew nothing, they'd think Uchiha owns Konoha. But I can walk into the Hokage's office whenever I want. Are you guys planning to declare independence? The 2 guards' faces darkened instantly, and even Itaki, walking behind them, had a subtle change in expression. Before he could speak, a deep and authoritative voice came from the entrance. You must be joking. The Uchiha are, of course, part of Konoha, and we always welcome friends. The guards turned around, only to break out in cold sweat when they saw who had arrived. With stiff postures, they bowed their heads respectfully. Clan head Fugaku. Father, Itaka greeted. Fugaku merely nodded at his son before walking past the 2 guards. With a friendly smile, he approached Yami and Izumi, his tone warm. You must be Shimura Yami. Itaki often mentions you. Welcome to the Uchiha clan. Really? Yami tilted his head with a look of innocent confusion. Then why were those 2 uncles so mean? They misunderstood my intentions, Fugaku quickly explained. The guards are here to identify potential spies, not to keep out friends. Tisk. Yami shook his head and sighed. What's the point of having subordinates who don't even understand orders? Maybe I should ask my grandfather to train them for a few days. I guarantee they'll follow orders properly after that. He's really good at this kind of thing. Fugaku's smile stiffened. Let Danzō train them? If those two guards went through Danzō's training, they'd probably come back blind or worse. No need to trouble Lord Danzō. I'll discipline them myself, Fugaku said quickly. He then turned to glare at the two guards, his Sharingan nearly activating out of frustration. Ding! Host establishes a hostile bond with Uchiha hero reward, yin release chakra, good, dot. Host establishes a hostile bond with Uchiha Takashi reward, yin release chakra, good, dot. Host establishes a bond with Uchiha Fugaku reward, yin release chakra, genius, dot. Host establishes a bond with Uchiha Ataki reward, special talent, 1-on-7 combat talent. Yami's body tensed as the notifications came in. He quickly instructed the system to hold off on merging the rewards for now, keeping his composure as he smiled at Fugaku. Then, he turned his gaze toward Ataki, his eyes gleaming with interest. A fat sheep. If Kakashi was known as 50-50 for being evenly matched with nearly anyone he fought, then Uchiha Ataki was the exact opposite. Against weaker opponents, he could annihilate them instantly. Against stronger foes, he could use his Manjiki Sharingan and exceptional tactical intelligence to turn the tide of battle or even claim victory. The Manjiki Sharingan certainly played a key role, but his pure combat talent shouldn't be underestimated either. Sasuke had ruined his eyes after just 2 days of using the Manjiki, yet Ataki had endured for years. That difference was telling. Even if Yami wasn't fond of Ataki's dutiful son persona, he had to admit it was undeniable. Uchiha Ataki, like Namikaze Minato, had reached the peak of cage-level strength. Chapter 7, Complications. After watching the two children leave, the smile on Fugaku's face gradually faded, replaced by a cold, stern expression as he fixed his gaze on the two guards. Starting next week, your workload will double. Notify everyone no one is allowed to stop Shimura from entering. The two Uchiha guards shivered slightly but quickly acknowledged the order and returned to their posts. Fugaku took his son home, reminding him along the way. Ataki, make sure to build a good relationship with Shimura at school. His attitude is crucial in easing tensions between our clan and the village leadership. Though Ataki was only 6 years old, his maturity far exceeded that of an ordinary child, and Fugaku treated him accordingly. Yes, father, Ataki replied respectfully, fully understanding the weight of his father's words. Seeing his son's agreement, Fugaku allowed himself a faint smile of relief. But soon, his expression turned grim again. The current situation gave him no reason to feel at ease. The isolation of the Uchiha clan was becoming more severe, their compound monitored constantly by the village's upper echelon. Fugaku wasn't certain whether this was Dan's doing or the third Hokage's, but regardless, he could only feign ignorance and endure. His true hatred was reserved for the masked man who had manipulated the Nine Tails. If not for the Nine Tails attack, the Uchiha wouldn't have been further ostracized, and the fourth Hokage wouldn't have died young. Namikaze Minato was not only exceptionally talented but also an upright, radiant figure, completely unlike Hiruzen or Dan's, those old, scheming politicians. More importantly, Minato had no prejudice against the Uchiha. He had even taken an Uchiha as his disciple. But now, he was dead. In the single year that Minato served as Hokage, tensions between the village and the Uchiha had eased significantly, giving Fugaku hope of bridging the gap. Yet that hope was shattered in a single night, and things only worsened afterward. Now, not only did he have to contend with Hiruzen, Dan's, and the other village elders' suspicion and hostility, but he also had to manage the growing radicalism within his own clan, balancing both sides in an increasingly impossible position. Still, the appearance of Yami and his close bond with Izumi gave Fugaku a sliver of hope. Dan's had no relatives left in this world aside from Yami. If Fugaku could extend Uchiha's goodwill through Yami and use him to establish a connection with Dan's. With that thought, Fugaku glanced at Ataki with newfound expectations. Meanwhile, Yami, who was accompanying Izumi, had no idea that Fugaku was setting his sights on him. He simply assumed that Fugaku's earlier show of friendliness was just to save face for Dan's. But even if he had known, he would have laughed it off, it wasn't something worth worrying about. At this point, no one in the world could resolve the conflict between Konoha and the Uchiha. The only one who could have Namikaze Minato had died last year. The seeds of this discord had been planted long ago during the reign of Senju Tobirama. The students he mentored had inherited his distrust of the Uchiha. Even if Yami was Dan's grandson, it wouldn't change anything. Not even Danzō himself could reconcile with the Uchiha. Hiruzen may have seemed like a weak-willed pacifist, but he was actually the one who feared the Uchiha the most. An independent, powerful armed force was the biggest threat to any leader lacking true control. Then there were the two old geezers, Udaten Koharu and Mitokado Homura Tobirama's former students, deeply influenced by his teachings. They, too, had no fondness for the Uchiha. There was no one in Konoha's upper ranks who had a positive view of them. And the Uchiha themselves had their own issues. Their arrogance, cultivated over years of managing the village's security, made it impossible for them to lower their heads and compromise. Fugaku was indeed a capable leader, but without overwhelming strength or the courage to act decisively, what could he really change? All he could do was quietly wait for the day his dutiful son would bring about change. "Izumi, Yami, it's time to eat," a gentle female voice called from outside the room. The two children exchanged smiles, put down their pens, and walked out. Izumi's mother, Uchiha Kiyomi, was naturally a kind and gentle woman after all. She had raised such a thoughtful, black-haired, straight-laced little girl like Izumi. As they entered the dining area, Kiyomi urged them to wash their hands first. Meanwhile, she set the table with grilled fish, sushi, and 3 bowls of miso soup. When Yami returned from washing up, Kiyomi smiled warmly at him. "I didn't know you'd be coming today, so I didn't prepare anything special, just some home-cooked dishes." "Not at all. These smell amazing, I'm starving." Yami played up his childlike charm, flashing a bright grin. Sure enough, Kiyomi's expression softened even more. Mischievous kids could be troublesome, but polite and sensible children were always endearing. "Then eat plenty. You're at an age where you need to grow," she said kindly, pushing a plate of fried fish toward him. In truth, she was deeply grateful to Yami. Not only had he helped Izumi out of her grief last year, but he had also taken extra care of her ever since, helping her gradually overcome the loss of her father. "I want to grow taller too. Time to eat," Izumi declared enthusiastically. The two children exchanged amused glances, breaking into small smiles. Indeed, nothing was as heartwarming as a cheerful little girl. Yami felt quite pleased. Today had been a productive day. Not only had he reaped plenty from Itaki, but Kiyomi had also given him an unexpected gift. Host establishes a bond with Uchiha Kiyomi, my son-in-law gets more appealing over time. Reward, mother-in-law's expectation. Mother-in-law's expectation, when the host and Uchiha Izumi are within 500 meters of each other, both of their training speeds increase by 100%. A training buff. Its value was no less than inheriting Uchiha bloodline talent. The system didn't restrict the type of training it affected, meaning whether it was ninjutsu, taijutsu, or chakra refinement, his growth rate would double. It seemed like he should start considering how to steal Izumi away from the Uchiha clan. Yami's thoughts raced. Of course, it wasn't just a matter of whether Izumi was willing. Danzō would be a significant obstacle on his own. He would have to plan carefully. By the time dinner was over, night had already fallen. Yami stayed a little longer, sparring with Izumi in taijutsu to test the effect of his new buff. Feeling its clear benefits, he eventually bid farewell and left. When he returned home, he was surprised to find Danzō waiting for him. "Old man, why are you back?" Yami asked in surprise. Danzō practically lived at Root. Even when Yami was younger, Danzō had spent more time at the underground base than at home. Yami had used his need for sunlight as an excuse to avoid staying there. Danzō chuckled. "I was in such a hurry last time that I forgot to give you your birthday present." He pushed a simple, long wooden box toward him. "Open it and take a look." To be continued. Chapter 8, Kusanagi, the special reward brought by the final bond. "It's just a birthday present. Was it really worth a special trip?" Yami muttered, but still opened the wooden box. Inside was a katana, slender, sharp, and gleaming coldly, as if it could slice through anything with ease. The hilt was wrapped in a snakeskin-like material to improve grip and friction. Yami's eyes widened. "Is this the Kusanagi sword?" "Not bad." Danzō remained expressionless, but there was a hint of pride in his voice. "Orochimaru heard it was your birthday and asked me to give this to you. Consider it a gift from both of us." "Yami, I don't believe you. As if Orochimaru would be so generous as to just hand me the Kusanagi sword. If he didn't already know what kind of person Orochimaru was, he might have actually believed it. Still, he was touched. Regardless of how Danzō treated outsiders, at least toward his grandson, he showed genuine care without any ulterior motives. "Thank you, Grandpa." Danzō froze for a moment. Was this the first time Yami had called him Grandpa? Ding! Host and Shimura Danzō's bond has reached the third stage, final level. Reward: 1 standard Jainin Chakra, special talent Ninja World Darkness. Ninja World Darkness, host can merge into any shadow, achieving concealment comparable to the Mayfly technique. Yami was also momentarily stunned. So just calling him Grandpa was enough to max out the bond? The two stared at each other in silence for a long moment before Danzō coughed to break the awkwardness. "It's getting late, Yami. Go rest, you still have school tomorrow. Remember, don't lose to the Uchiha." "Oh." Yami nodded, picked up the box containing the Kusanagi sword, and walked back to his room. At the same time, he made a decision. Dying while sealing a bridge? Too pathetic. Once he grew stronger, he would take over route. It was better for this old man to stay home and enjoy retirement. That night, sitting on his bed, Yami played with the Kusanagi sword for a while before going over his gains from the day. Status panel. Name: Shimura Yami. Gender: male. Age: 6 years old. Date of birth: April 1st, year 46, Konoha calendar. Chakra attributes: fire, genius; wind, genius; yang, excellent; earth, good; yin, genius. Total chakra: 1.1 standard Jainin chakra. Chakra control talent: genius. Mastered ninjutsu: 3 basic techniques: proficient, wind release, great breakthrough; normal, fire release, great fireball, normal. Nature transformation, wind release, mastery. Special talents: father's expectations, mother's love, senju bloodline, thin, underdevelopment, swordsmanship genius, stealth mastery, ninja world darkness, mother-in-law's expectation. His progress was nothing short of astonishing. Before today, he was just a promising academy student, a genius among his peers. But now, not only had his chakra reached Jainin level, but he had also gained 2 new chakra natures and 2 special talents. The earth release chakra wasn't particularly interesting, he had no intention of training it unless he had genius level talent for it. The yin release chakra, however, was an entirely different story. Yin release was a rare and valuable attribute, closely tied to spiritual energy and illusion techniques. It governed the power of the mind and could shape the intangible into reality. The Nara clan's shadow manipulation techniques and the Yamanaka clan's mind-body jutsu were both examples of yin-based ninjutsu. Even more importantly, the Uchiha clan's Sharingan was also deeply linked to yin release. In the future, it was highly likely that he would obtain a bond related to the Uchiha bloodline. Strengthening his yin release would be crucial for that. However, Yami's gaze fell on the box containing the Kusanagi sword. At this stage, swordsmanship should be his main focus. With his advanced wind release nature transformation, his attacks would be as lethal as a Jainin-s jutsu. And then there was the Jainin level chakra he had just received. Yami concentrated, carefully sensing it. He estimated that 1 standard Jainin unit of chakra was roughly 50 times that of a standard Genin. 5 times that of a standard Jnin. However, it had not yet reached the level of an elite Jainin. That made sense. He needed to keep building his bonds, especially second and third stage bonds if he wanted to see his strength skyrocket. With that in mind, Yami set himself a new goal. To become the ultimate social butterfly of the ninja world. The next day, Yami went to the academy as usual. After yesterday's incident, where he had used an explosive tag on a target, his name had already spread to the upper grades. Now that people had formed an impression of him, all he needed to do was learn their names, and the initial bonds would be established automatically. After school, Yami accompanied Izumi home for taijutsu training with Ebisu-sensei. Though the tuition was only meant to cover 1 student, Ebisu didn't dare argue with the Shimura family. He had no choice but to accept Izumi as well. With mother-in-law's expectation, enhancing his progress, Yami's improvement rate was nothing short of terrifying. His mastery of Konoha's basic taijutsu had already surpassed that of most recently graduated genin. If this continued, Ebisu suddenly realized that his job might soon become obsolete. For the first time, he felt a sense of crisis. Meanwhile, Izumi had no such concerns. The little black-haired girl watched Yami with sparkling eyes, full of admiration. Yami is amazing, and what he shows at school isn't even his full strength. I have to work harder, I can't let him leave me behind. Chapter 9, New Teacher? A month passed in the blink of an eye. The leaves on the streets of Konoha had grown greener, and the faint chirping of cicadas signaled the arrival of summer. Inside the Shimura compound, Yami was locked in an intense sparring match with a shinobi. Blades clashed at high speed, leaving only flashes of steel and shadow. Izumi, sitting on the sidelines, couldn't even follow their movements. All she could hear was the crisp sound of swords colliding and see the blurred figures exchanging blows. Yami suddenly lifted his sword, forcing his opponent to lean back to avoid a strike aimed at his throat. However, just as the opponent dodged, Yami's attack shifted, what had seemed like an upward strike transformed into a lateral slash. The flat edge of his blade struck his opponent's arm. Clang! The shinobi's sword slipped from his grasp, clattering to the ground. The match had ended. Yami exhaled, sheathed his blade, and said calmly, "You lost, Nishimura-sensei." His opponent, Nishimura-ke, remained silent for a moment. He was an ordinary member of Root, a Chunin-level shinobi specializing in assassination and swordsmanship. Young Master Yami truly is a genius, Nishimura-ke finally sighed, lowering his head slightly. Throughout the match, he hadn't used his full speed or strength after all, his opponent was just a 6-year-old child. But his swordsmanship? He had brought it to its peak. Yet, despite only training Yami for 2 weeks, all the techniques he had honed over years of practice had been absorbed and surpassed by this boy. A true genius existed on a completely different level than ordinary shinobi like him. Young Master Yami, Nishimura-ke continued, lowering his head further. I have nothing left to teach you. I will report to Lord Dan's and request a more suitable instructor for you. Thank you, Yami replied with a small nod, watching as Nishimura-ke departed. Then, he turned to Izumi with a smile and beckoned her over. Let's go, I'll walk you home. Izumi eagerly hopped down from her perch, rushed to Yami's side, and took his hand. Hehe, Yami, you're amazing. Nishimura-sensei is a Chunin, and you still won. It's just a Chunin. You should set your sights higher, Izumi, Yami said as they walked. There was no arrogance in his tone, just calm understanding. He had learned an important lesson: never judge a ninja's strength based purely on the ranking system seen in the original story. What did it mean to be a genin? Anyone who mastered the 3 basic juttas and could use them proficiently could graduate from the academy and become a genin. Most genin weren't even qualified to step onto the battlefield, they were mere cannon fodder. Chunin, on the other hand, were squad leaders who possessed stronger combat abilities and could lead teams on missions. According to the system's evaluation, the average Chunin had 10 times the chakra of a standard genin and could proficiently use B-rank ninjutsu. Defeating an ordinary Chunin in a sword fight? Nothing to brag about. And honestly, even if Nishimura-ke had gone all out, he still wouldn't have stood a chance. Status panel. Name, Shimura Yami. Gender, male. Age, 6 years old. Date of birth, April 1, year 46, Konoha calendar. Chakra attributes, fire, genius, wind, genius, yang, excellent, earth, good, water, good, yin, genius. Total chakra, 1.6 standard Jainin chakra. Chakra control talent, genius. Mastered ninjutsu, 3 basic techniques, proficient, wind release, great breakthrough, proficient, wind release, gale palm, proficient, fire release, great fireball, proficient, fire release, blazing fire, proficient, fire release, dragon fire technique, normal. Nature transformation, wind release, mastery, fire release, beginner. Strength evaluation, with those small arms and legs, you can still defeat a Chunin head-on. Recently, Yami hadn't received any major system rewards. Most of his bond rewards had been additional chakra and basic attributes. However, thanks to Izumi's support, his personal training results had been impressive. He had considered asking Izumi to move out of the Uchiha compound, but in the end, he abandoned the idea. At present, the village and Uchiha were not yet at their breaking point. As a child, his words held little influence. Even if he spoke up, Izumi's mother likely wouldn't take him seriously, and his actions might attract unwanted attention from those with ulterior motives. For now, it was best to wait. The Uchiha clan could still hold on for a few more years. At Root headquarters, After leaving Yami's house, Shimura reported to the root base and soon stood before Shimura Danzō, kneeling on one knee. Lord Danzō, young Master Yami's swordsmanship has already surpassed mine. I am no longer qualified to be his instructor. So soon? Danzō raised an eyebrow in surprise. I see. You may go. Shimura bowed and vanished. It seems Yami's talent has exceeded my expectations. Danzō was pleased, but at the same time, slightly troubled. On the one hand, he was delighted by Yami's overwhelming potential. On the other hand, finding a suitable sword instructor for him would be difficult. Currently, there were very few elite swordsmen in Konoha. Mariboshi Kasuke was a possibility, but his close ties to the third Hokage made him a problematic choice. Their relationship was strained, and Danzō wasn't confident he could convince Kasuke to teach Yami. The Yamashiro clan. Danzō briefly considered it but quickly dismissed the thought. The Yamashiro family had a renowned swordmaster among their ranks, but to Danzō, he wasn't significantly stronger than Shimura. If a shinobi was skilled enough to be recruited into root, they weren't an ordinary chunin to begin with. That meant the Yamashiro swordsman likely wouldn't be much of an improvement. The same reasoning applied to the Hosoki clan, another wasted option. Then, suddenly, a certain figure flashed through Danzō's mind. A young man. Despite his age, he had left a deep impression. His swordsmanship was excellent. And he came from the right background. The only issue was, his identity was sensitive. After a long pause, Danzō made his decision. For Yami, it was worth the risk. The next day, weekend morning. There were no academy classes today, and Yami was just about to leave the house when Danzō unexpectedly returned. Yami, I've found you a new instructor, Danzō said with a rare smile. He's not only skilled in swordsmanship but can also teach you ninjutsu and taijutsu. Who is it? Yami asked curiously. Swish. A breeze blew through the room. A young man suddenly appeared beside Danzō, his presence swift and silent. Yami turned to face him, and his eyes widened in surprise. It was him. Chapter 10, Will of Fire? Hello, my name is Uchiha Shisui. A black-haired boy with a gentle smile appeared in an instant. He looked about 11 or 12 years old, standing just over 1.5 meters tall. But Yami didn't dare to underestimate him. Uchiha Shisui was currently the Uchiha clan's strongest genius. Aside from infinite Tsukuyomi, he possessed the most powerful Genjutsu Koda Amatsukami. He was also half of Itake's mentor, the catalyst for Itake awakening his Manjiki Sharingan. Now, Yami could only assume that Danzō's brain had been flooded with water release from Hiruzen, considering he had actually allowed Uchiha Shisui to become his teacher. Sure, Shisui had the skill to teach him, but did Danzō seriously think this through? Shimura Danzō, the second greatest anti-Uchiha figure in the ninja world, right after Senju Tobirama, who had long since passed, was entrusting his grandson's training to Uchiha Shisui. Noticing Yami's puzzled expression, Danzō assumed he was doubting Shisui's abilities. His tone turned serious. Yami, don't underestimate Uchiha Shisui just because he's only a few years older than you. He's a genius of the Uchiha clan. He has completed 8 S-rank missions and more than 20 A-rank missions. He specializes in the body flicker technique and Kenjutsu. Shinobi from enemy nations call him Shisui of the body flicker. You must learn from him. Hearing Danzō's praise, Yami remained silent. But Shisui scratched his head in embarrassment, looking like an ordinary, good-natured teenager. Dan-sama, you flatter me. I still have a lot to learn. Danzō glanced at him but said nothing. Still learning? What's the point? You trying to become Hokage or something? Yami sighed internally, accepting the situation. He nodded and said, Shisui-senpai, I'll be in your care from now on. Yami, can I call you that? After receiving a nod, Shisui's smile widened. I'll do my best to teach you everything I know and help you become an outstanding shinobi. And don't call me Shisui-senpai. I'm not that much older than you, just call me by my name. His sincerity was evident. When Danzō had contacted him last night, asking if he was willing to be Yami's instructor, Shisui had agreed without hesitation. Just like Uchiha Itake, or rather, as Itake had learned from him, Shisui had long stopped focusing solely on the Uchiha clan. He looked at things from the perspective of the entire village, even beyond, from the view of a cage. Shisui was well aware of the tension between his clan and Konoha, especially now during such a delicate time. Unlike Itake, however, he still believed that the conflict could be resolved. To him, Dan's request was a positive signal, a sign that, at the very least, the village was willing to trust him as an Uchiha. Yami's identity was important. He was also close to an Uchiha Izumi. If he could influence Yami, he might indirectly influence Dan's, using a small starting point to shift the larger situation. Even if it didn't work, at the very least, he could make Dan's understand his stance. Ding! Host and Uchiha Shisui have established a master-disciple bond. Reward, Dynamic Vision. Fuse it. As expected, the system notification appeared. Yami was momentarily surprised but quickly accepted the reward. Suddenly, the world in his eyes slowed down, it felt as though he could even track the flow of the wind itself. This sensation only lasted for a brief moment before returning to normal, unnoticed by the other two. You two start training, I have official matters to attend to, Dan said. After making the introduction, he left the Shimura compound. However, the undercover guards he had brought with him remained behind, closely monitoring Shisui's every move. Dan's had his reasons. By selecting Shisui, a Uchiha aligned with Konoha's interests, he could temporarily lull the Uchiha clan into a false sense of security, making it seem as though the village had no intention of taking action against them. At the same time, ensuring Yami's safety was a priority. The two Jonin-level guards stationed nearby served as insurance, preventing any possibility of Shisui brainwashing Yami, or worse, outright attacking him. These high-level political players always had ulterior motives. A seemingly simple decision could carry 800 different calculations. In the courtyard. Yami, where do you want to start? Shisui asked gently. Dan-sama mentioned that you have fire and wind release. Uchiha specializes in fire release, and we also have sword techniques that incorporate it. Shisui-senpai, I have something else to take care of this morning. Let's start training in the afternoon. If you want, you can come with me, Yami said. Where to? Shisui asked curiously. Half an hour later, Konoha Orphanage. Shisui stood at the entrance of a modest building. Konoha Orphanage. Come in, Yami said, waving him forward. Behind them, several shinobi carrying large supply packages followed them inside. The orphanage was located at the edge of the village. It wasn't particularly large, just a 3-story building with a courtyard about half the size of a football field. A bespectacled woman in her early 30s stood in the yard, playing with a group of 4- and 5-year-old children. She had a gentle smile, but her expression changed slightly when she saw Yami and the others approaching. Still, she quickly walked over to greet them. Little boy, what brings you here? She instinctively sensed that this 6-year-old was the leader of the group, so she addressed him directly. Are you Director Non? Yami asked with a bright smile. My name is Shimura Yami. I'm Hiraki's classmate. I heard the orphanage has been struggling, sometimes even running out of food, so I brought some supplies. Shimura-kun. A boy Yami's age ran over. His face was full of gratitude, but no second-stage bond notification appeared. Non's pupils contracted slightly, though her expression remained well-controlled. She smiled at the right moment. Thank you so much, Shimura-kun. It's nothing. My family has plenty of money, Yami said casually. Non's lips twitched slightly. Meanwhile, Shisui, who had remained silent until now, looked at the small boy standing in front of him. His expression shifted slightly. Such a kind-hearted child, thinking of others at such a young age. Was this the will of fire? Chapter 11, Serve them red pepper. The children at the orphanage enjoyed a rare feast. Naturally, Yami's gifts were not ordinary. Most of the food he brought consisted of various meats, a luxury for the orphans of Konoha's orphanage. Typically, they only had the chance to eat meat 2 or 3 times a month, and even then, the portions were small. So today's meal was truly a special treat. However, Yami himself wasn't in the best mood. His expression remained dark, and he spoke less and less. Is the food not to your liking? Non cautiously observed his demeanor. I'm very sorry. The orphanage's chef isn't very skilled. If she were just an ordinary orphanage director, she wouldn't need to be so careful, even if Yami had donated valuable supplies. But unfortunately, being the orphanage director was only Non's official identity. She also had another role. Yakushi Non, an elite route operative. A spy who had completed countless dangerous missions, earning the title Wandering Maiko. Most of the orphans in the orphanage possessed the potential to become shinobi, making them a valuable reserve force for Root. Nan was well aware of Dan's ruthlessness. Yami was his last remaining relative, meaning she had to tread carefully. If she made a misstep and earned his resentment, her plans for retirement would be utterly ruined. That was why she paid such close attention to his mood swings. It's nothing. Yami shook his head slightly, quickly finishing the food in his bowl. He then placed his chopsticks down and said, "Director Nan, I have training this afternoon, so I won't stay much longer." As he stood up, Shisui also stopped his conversation with the children. Yami walked over and looked at the white-haired boy who had been chatting with Shisui earlier. "What's your name?" "Kabuto," the white-haired boy answered softly, gratitude evident in his eyes. "All right, Kabuto, I'll come to see you next time." Yami smiled, then left with Shisui and the shinobi who had accompanied him. After spending half a day at the orphanage, Yami had interacted with nearly 200 orphans. However, aside from Nan, only 20 children had formed a bond with him and granted rewards. No wonder he wasn't pleased. Most of those 20 had basic chakra, and only a few had unique chakra attributes. If the rewards from Nan and Kabuto weren't decent, he would have been even more frustrated. Host has established a vigilance bond with Yakushi Nan, obtaining chakra control talent, excellent. Host has established a gratitude bond with Yakushi Kabuto, obtaining chakra control talent, genius. Chakra control talent might seem minor, but in reality, it was incredibly important. Tree climbing and water walking were just the most basic training exercises. The real challenge lay in accurately regulating chakra output during battle. In game terms, chakra was equivalent to mana. Having a large mana pool allowed for the use of more jutsu, but it didn't determine the strength of those techniques. A jutsu's power depended on multiple factors. The amount of chakra infused into the technique. The user's mastery of nature transformation. The inherent strength of the jutsu itself. Chakra control not only affected the maximum output of a single jutsu but also determined one's ability to learn high-level techniques. Take Uzumaki Naruto's wind release, Rasen Shuriken, for example. It required exceptional chakra control and advanced nature transformation mastery to even attempt. After integrating these rewards, Yami's chakra control talent hadn't reached the ultimate level, but it had improved significantly. Aside from Tsunade, his chakra control talent was now likely the best in the entire shinobi world. Yami returned to the Shimura clan estate to train with Shisui. Since it was the first day, there was no structured training yet. Shisui simply had Yami go all out against him, using every technique at his disposal, so he could assess his level. Without revealing his hidden nature transformations, Yami displayed his full strength. This impressed Shisui repeatedly. At Yami's age, Shisui himself had been much weaker. His rapid growth only began after awakening the Sharingan. Especially in Kenjutsu, no wonder Dan's had specifically asked him to mentor Yami. As the sun set, the afternoon of training quickly came to an end. Standing at the entrance, Shisui smiled at Yami. "Yami, I'll bring the Uchiha clan's Kenjutsu scroll tomorrow. As for the body flicker technique, I'll teach it to you once your swordsmanship reaches a bottleneck. What do you think?" Yami nodded. "I'll follow your guidance, Shisui-senpai." It was clear that Shisui was genuinely investing in him. Not only was he willing to pass down Uchiha Kenjutsu, but he also intended to teach him the signature body flicker technique that had earned him fame. After watching Shisui leave, Izumi, who had been starving, thought she could finally eat. However, she was soon pulled along by Yami, who bought a massive quantity of green peppers from the market. He then had Aberame Seiji and Yamanaka Ryo carry them to the orphanage. Under Nana's puzzled gaze, Yami, acting like a spoiled young master, ordered the orphanage's chef to stop preparing dinner and instead serve an all-green pepper banquet. In Konoha, green peppers were one of the most hated foods both by children and many adults. Not only did they have a strong, distinct smell, but many found their taste unbearable, similar to how some people despised cilantro. To make matters worse, most of Konoha's cooking methods involved boiling or steaming them plainly. Even if someone could tolerate the smell, the taste was atrocious. The green peppers Yami had bought were essentially the entire market's stock. Dish after dish of green peppers was served. As Nan lectured the children about the nutritional benefits of green peppers, they forced themselves to swallow the bitter meal, their expressions filled with agony. Seeing this, Yami grinned and announced loudly, "Don't worry. I'll bring even more green peppers next week. Eat them without hesitation." Waya. Finally, a young child couldn't hold back and burst into tears. It was like a chain reaction soon, wails and cries echoed throughout the orphanage. Nan and the caregivers scrambled to comfort the distraught children, while Yamanaka Ryo and Aberame Seiji's faces twitched uncontrollably. Their young master was truly wicked. As expected of Dan's grandson. Yami chuckled in satisfaction. Congratulations, host. Chapter 12, Hatred is the Way Forward. After the green pepper feast, the orphanage was in an uproar, and Yami achieved exactly what he wanted. More than 100 bonds reached the first stage instantly. The system notifications came so rapidly that he could barely keep up, and some even provided 2 rewards at once. A realization dawned upon him. People rarely remember kindness, but hatred? Hatred leaves a deep impression. If he wanted to establish bonds with everyone, the fastest way wasn't by befriending them, that was impossible. But, making them feel disgusted, fearful, or even hateful. Only emotions like hatred could unite even the 5 great nations in mutual understanding. Yami suddenly felt a twinge of regret. If he had Dan's reputation and the fear he commanded, not to mention his ability to shift blame, then the rewards he could obtain from these bonds might have already made him invincible in the ninja world. Kabuto silently observed Yami. One moment, he was smiling, the next, his face returned to its usual indifference. Kabuto felt a strange sense of unease. This kid was terrifyingly unpredictable. Host has reached the second stage of the bond with Yakushi Kabuto. Reward, Special Talent Scientific Research Ability. Yami snapped out of his thoughts and glanced at Kabuto. What was this kid thinking about? How did he suddenly reach the second stage? At the Ninja Academy, Kazama Shoaki stood before the class with a serious expression. Tomorrow, we will hold this year's final exam. This test will assess everything you've learned over the past year and consists of 2 parts, a written test in the morning and a practical test in the afternoon. The 3rd Hokage will also be present to observe your performance. As soon as he finished speaking, the classroom erupted into chatter. The Hokage is coming. I've only seen him at the entrance ceremony. This is awesome. If I do well and get praised by the Hokage, my parents won't dare to scold me anymore. Although the ideological indoctrination wasn't as intense yet, the 3rd Hokage had ruled for over 20 years, and his prestige in the village was unmatched. The mere mention of his presence had the students excited. Even Itaka straightened his posture subconsciously. Kazama Shoaki remained patient, waiting for the excitement to die down before continuing. I hope all of you will perform your best. If anyone fails, their homework for next semester will be doubled. The noisy classroom instantly fell silent. The mischievous kids immediately sat up straight, and Shoaki dismissed the class. As usual, Yami walked home with Izumi. He wasn't particularly concerned about the 3rd Hokage's visit. Besides maintaining his presence and reinforcing his reputation, he knew that Hiruzen was most likely coming for Itaki. Every Uchiha genius caused unease within the village. Itaki wasn't just a genius, he was also the clan leader's son. Of course, Hiruzen would take an interest in him. Izumi, I plan to graduate after this exam. Hey! The little girl, who was enjoying a box of Chibi Mariko snacks, froze in surprise before growing anxious. Graduate early? Then I want to graduate early too. Having trained with Yami every day, Izumi knew his strength well. Forget just graduating, he was already strong enough to be a Chunin. Even she had reached the level of a graduate. For some reason, whenever she trained with Yami, her mind felt sharper, and her progress skyrocketed compared to practicing at home. She had already mastered the 3 basic techniques and learned 2 fire release jutsu. Her only weakness was chakra capacity. Of course, that was only in comparison to adult shinobi. As an Uchiha, even without awakening her Sharingan, Izumi's chakra reserves far exceeded that of ordinary people. She was at least at the level of a genin. Izumi, you can't graduate yet. Yami stopped and looked at her seriously. The war isn't over. Even if you don't go to the battlefield, the missions you'd be assigned will still be dangerous. If you graduate in 2 years, things will be much better. Then stay in school with me. Izumi pouted, tension in her expression at the mention of war. We can graduate together after it's over. Izumi, I can't learn anything by staying in school, it would just be a waste of time. And don't worry about my safety. The village won't assign me anything too dangerous. After much persuasion, Yami finally convinced Izumi to give up on graduating early. Right now, he could barely protect himself, he had no extra energy to look after Izumi as well. If he stayed in school, he wouldn't be able to interact with more shinobi or form new bonds. He wouldn't be able to reach the second stage of his mother's legacy and elevate his talent. So, he had to graduate. Otherwise, he'd be stuck in the academy, repeating grades until he eventually graduated with Hanabi. Meanwhile, in the Uchiha district, in a small forest, several large trees were lined with targets. Uchiha Itachi, who had been practicing his shuriken techniques, suddenly stopped, as if processing some new information. After a moment, he opened his eyes again. Final exam, the third Hokage. After absorbing the knowledge from his shadow clone's report, Itachi showed no particular reaction and simply returned to training. Only when the scent of dinner filled the air did he finally gather his ninja tools and head home. Brother! Brother! A small figure wobbled out of the house. A gentle smile appeared on Uchiha Itachi's face as he took 2 quick steps forward and picked him up. Sasuke! Brother, hug me! All right, come here. Holding little Sasuke, Itachi felt this was the happiest part of his day. A gentle voice called from the kitchen. Itachi, you're back? Go wash your hands and get ready for dinner. And help Sasuke wash up too. Got it, Mom. Carrying Sasuke, Itachi headed to the bathroom. That evening, during dinner, Uchiha Fugaku brought up the final exam. I heard the third Hokage will be visiting the school. Make sure you perform well and don't disgrace the Uchiha name. Yes. Itachi gave a calm nod as he carefully removed the bones from his fish and placed small pieces into Sasuke's mouth. That was the end of their conversation. No one in the household considered a simple exam to be worth much attention. To be continued. Chapter 13, Shimura vs. Uchiha. The next day, the students arrived at the academy, and the exams began shortly after. In reality, students at the Ninja Academy worked quite hard. There was a lot to learn every day, even for first years. Basic chakra refinement, shuriken practice twice a week, 2 taijutsu classes daily, and on top of that, at least 4 hours of academic lessons. Compared to elementary schools in his previous life, this was already an intense workload. The subjects covered in the academic courses were incredibly diverse, covering physics, chemistry, poisons, as well as the history and geography of various nations, creating an odd mishmash of disciplines. Looking at the numbers and symbols on the test paper, Yami sighed before starting to answer the questions. Question: There is a ninja 30 meters away in the southeast direction. The wind is blowing from north to south at a speed of 10 meters per second. Please calculate the trajectory and describe the approximate throwing force needed. Answer: Tie an explosive tag to the shuriken and throw it however you want. If it doesn't explode, I lose. Question: The assassination target is being guarded by 3 ninjas, positions shown in the diagram. Please design a route to complete the assassination and escape successfully. Answer: Use the Flying Thunder God technique to kill the 3 guards first, eliminate the target, and exit the same way. Question: List 3 contributions the third Hokage has made to Konoha. Answer: 1 Banned casinos in the village. 2 No more contributions. 3 Still no more contributions. Question: Write an essay about your feelings for the village. Answer: My grandpa is the Hokage's advisor. In less than an hour, Yami completed the entire test. He didn't hand it in early but waited until the time was up to submit it along with his classmates. Just as he was about to leave with Izumi for lunch, Kazama Shuaki stopped him. Yami, Kazama Shuaki called out with a friendly expression. There will be a shuriken throwing test this afternoon. The third Hokage wants to see your real abilities, not just your wealth. So, don't use explosive tags this time. Ever since Yami had shocked the class by attaching explosive tags to his shuriken, he had made a habit of blowing up multiple targets during practice. Shuaki had no way to stop him. But today was different. With the third Hokage present, if Yami used explosive tags again, Shuaki would have no face left as a teacher. I won't use explosive tags, but in return, Kazama-sensei has to agree to one of my requests, Yami replied with a bright smile. In the afternoon, the first-year students gathered at the testing grounds. They didn't have to wait long before Sarutobi Hiruzen arrived, wearing his Hokage robe and hat, accompanied by his guards. The students became excited and rushed forward eagerly. Hiruzen waved off his guards and greeted the children with a kind smile. If not for his Hokage robe and hat, he would have seemed just like a friendly old man from the neighborhood. Yami didn't join the crowd. Instead, he stood at a distance, quietly observing this so-called professor of fire. Even though Hiruzen had a deep bond with his grandfather, this was actually Yami's first time seeing him in person. There were still 10 years before the events of the main story. Hiruzen's face wasn't as wrinkled yet he was still under 60. Suddenly, as if sensing his gaze, Hiruzen, who had been chatting with a chubby boy, looked up. Their eyes met. After a brief pause, Hiruzen quickly recalled who he was and walked toward him with a group of people following. "You must be Yami," Hiruzen said with a smile. "That's right," Yami nodded. "Hello, old monkey." The surrounding students and teachers were stunned. Kazama Shuiki's mouth hung open, with only one thought in his mind. "It's over. My teaching career is over. Old monkey." Surprisingly, Hiruzen wasn't as angry as everyone expected. He simply frowned, then smacked Yami lightly on the head. "That old fool Danzō must have taught you that. Don't pick up bad habits from him. Yami. This is bad. The biggest obstacle to farming bond rewards turns out to be my own grandfather." The sheer power of the blame cage was terrifying. Hiruzen instantly assumed Yami's disrespect was Danzō's fault. Yami had dared to speak like that because, first, his identity protected him, and second, because of Hiruzen's carefully maintained image, he was bound to let a child's words slide. Unfortunately, not only did Hiruzen not take offense, but he also dismissed it entirely, meaning Yami didn't receive any bond rewards. Seeing Yami's gloomy expression, Hiruzen ruffled his hair. "I'll be paying attention to your performance today. If I'm not satisfied, I'll be sure to complain to your grandfather." With that, he chuckled and walked away. The test began. One by one, students stepped forward for their shuriken throwing assessment. When it was Itake's turn, Hiruzen, who had remained casual before, visibly straightened up. Watching Itake launch 5 shuriken simultaneously, all hitting the bullseye, Hiruzen stroked his beard and nodded in approval. As expected of the Uchiha clan, their control over ninja tools is exceptional, even without the Sharingan. To his surprise, Yami used the exact same throwing technique. This is Uchiha Shurikenjutsu. Even Itake was caught off guard. As the son of the Uchiha clan leader, Itake had access to classified information, and he had never heard of Yami receiving training in Uchiha techniques. Unknown to him, Danzō had forbidden Shisui from mentioning that he was mentoring Yami. Hiruzen whispered something to a nearby guard, his expression unreadable as he returned to his usual demeanor. Soon, the shuriken test ended, and the next stage taijutsu sparring began. "The students whose names I call will come forward, make the seal of confrontation, and only start fighting when I give the signal. After the match, you must perform the seal of reconciliation, just as I taught you in class," Kazama Shuiki instructed. After announcing the rules, he called out the first pair. First match, Arakawa Kenta vs. Horikawa Kichi. The two boys stepped into the ring. The first-year taijutsu fights weren't impressive. Their only advantage over regular children was their enhanced speed and strength due to chakra, but their techniques were crude. After just a few moves, Horikawa Kichi gave up due to the pain. Rubbing his stomach, he left the field with teary eyes. Kazama Shuiki shook his head helplessly and glanced at Sarutobi Hiruzen, whose face remained unreadable. Then he looked down at the match schedule, his gaze stopping at the final pairing. Second match, Shimura Yami vs. Uchiha Itake. The crowd erupted in excitement. Chapter 14, Let's Show Off Together. Bonus. Itake and Yami were both recognized as geniuses whether in their class or the entire academy. Itake had the advantage of his prestigious surname and always scored perfectly on tests. Yami, on the other hand, earned his reputation through sheer strength. Even senior students had been beaten by him, making him somewhat of a school bully. The two had never officially faced off, and their relative strength had been a topic of debate. Most students believed Itake was stronger after all, the Uchiha name carried significant weight. But today, they would finally see them fight. The entire class buzzed with excitement. "Go, Yami! You have to win! Take down that arrogant Uchiha! They're both so cute! I can't decide! Whatever, Yami is cuter, go, Yami!" The atmosphere was electric, and most students cheered for Yami, except for those who had been on the receiving end of his fists. Although he looked down on most of these brats, Yami wasn't the type to act aloof when approached, which made him surprisingly popular. Itaki, on the other hand, always seemed deep in thought, distant, unsociable. He fit the stereotype of the Uchiha perfectly. Even Hiruzen straightened in his seat, curiosity flickering in his eyes. In the clearing, Yami and Itaki stood a few meters apart, facing each other. At noon, Yami had specifically requested Kazama Shuki to arrange this match. Graduating with the title of genius would leave a lasting impression, making it easier to establish bonds in the future. Of course, it also gave him an opportunity to beat up Itaki. Kazama Shuki stepped forward. Both of you, make the seal of confrontation. At his command, Yami and Itaki raised their hands and formed the seal. Taking a few steps back, Shuki then signaled the start. Itaki immediately took a stance, but what puzzled him was that Yami didn't move. Instead, Yami turned his head to Kazama Shuki. "Sensei, I don't think we'll be making the seal of reconciliation today." Before Shuki could ask why, Yami suddenly charged forward. "So fast!" Gasps echoed through the crowd. The first-year students could only see a blur as Yami closed nearly 10 meters in an instant, appearing right in front of Itaki. Even Hiruzen's eyes widened slightly. This body flicker technique. It's just like Uchiha Shisui's. Itaki's instincts screamed danger. Seeing the incoming punch, he quickly raised his arms to block. But Yami was too fast. Before Itaki could fully react. Bang! A puff of smoke erupted. Itaki was gone. A shadow clone. Hiruzen shot to his feet. Even his guards were stunned. Compared to Yami's speed and strength, what shocked them more was the fact that he had learned the B-rank shadow clone jutsu in his first year and had even sent a clone to take his classes. "Sensei, I told you we wouldn't need the seal of reconciliation today," Yami said casually. "But it's fine. If Itaki comes to school tomorrow, we can fight again then." With that, Yami formed a hand seal. And vanished into a puff of smoke. Another shadow clone. Hiruzen was completely speechless. Outside the academy, beneath the shade of a large tree, the real Yami lounged with his eyes closed, enjoying a nap. If he had simply used a shadow clone to defeat Itaki with a single punch, it wouldn't have been shocking enough. In the end, Itaki would still be the one standing in the spotlight, while Yami would become a mere stepping stone. So, before the match even started, he had quietly switched himself with a shadow clone. Now, he simply waited for the rewards to roll in. Host has established a bond with Yamanaka Jun. Reward, Earth Release Nature Transformation, excellent. Host has established a bond with Narashikaku. Reward, Yin Attribute Chakra, ordinary. Host has established a bond with Hirashi Eiji. Reward, plus 0.5 Standard Jainin Chakra. Host has established a bond with Sarutobi Hiruzen. Reward, Fire, Water, Wind, Earth and Lightning Attributes, Genius. Yami's eyes lit up. Finally, Hiruzen had dropped a major reward. The third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen was known as the Professor of Ninjutsu. Despite lacking a special bloodline limit, his mastery of all 5 elemental releases allowed him to combine them into powerful jutsu, making him a formidable cage-level shinobi. His strength during the fight with Orochimaru couldn't be taken at face value. After all, he was an old man in his 70s, already stabbed before the battle even began. Expecting him to fight at full power was unrealistic. In truth, the third and fourth Hokage represented the peak of ordinary shinobi. The third Tsuchikage, Noki, was also comparable, but his dust release belonged to the rare Kekiite category, making it too unique to be a fair comparison. For Yami to gain 5 genius-level elemental affinities in just the first stage of his bond with Hiruzen. What about the second stage? Or the third? Tisk. Old man, look at Hiruzen, then look at yourself. No wonder you never became Hokage. Yami chuckled, activated his body flicker technique, and disappeared from the tree in a blur. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the entire school was in an uproar. Kazama Shuki was on the verge of fainting. Both students used shadow clones for the exam, and I had no idea. Continue the test. I'll question Yami and Itaka later, Hiruzen ordered, regaining his composure. Yes, Lord Hokage. By the time all students finished their tests, Hiruzen gave a few words of encouragement before leaving in a hurry. Summon Dance and Uchiha Fugaku to my office. Understood. An envy hidden in the shadows flickered away. Soon after, the two men arrived at the Hokage building, exchanging glances as they met. Uchiha Fugaku gave a slight bow. Danzō, expressionless as ever, merely paused for 2 seconds before striding into the building. That night, after leaving the Hokage building, Danzō returned home immediately. Yami, are you awake? I'm up. Yami opened his bedroom door and walked downstairs, holding a book. Danzō nodded approvingly. You did well today. Watching the Uchiha suffer a setback always pleased him. But seeing his own grandson deal the blow? Even better. It was just a shadow clone, no big deal, Yami replied casually. Yes, a single shadow clone isn't enough, Danzō agreed. Which is why you'll fight again tomorrow. Hiruzen, I, and the 2 other elders will be there. Uchiha Fugaku will also come to observe. Yami, do you have the confidence to defeat Uchiha Itachi? To be continued. Bonus for 10 reviews, next bonus at 20 reviews XD. Comment. 6 comment. Vote. Chapter 15, keep calm and blame Danzō. At the same time, within the Uchiha clan, Fugaku and Itachi sat across from each other. I'm sorry, father. I disappointed you, Itachi said softly, lowering his head. Fugaku had been strict with Itachi since he was a child. At the age of 4, he had taken him to the battlefield to teach him the harsh realities of the shinobi world. Itachi understood his father's expectations and had trained diligently. Yet today, he had been defeated in a single blow. Yami's speed was overwhelming. Itachi's eyes could follow it, but his body couldn't keep up. And, there was something else that troubled him. Don't apologize. Learning the shadow clone jutsu at your age and using it to attend class the whole day is already impressive, Fugaku said in a low but satisfied tone, showing no disappointment. Itachi's talent had exceeded his expectations. As per the Hokage's request, you will fight Shimura again tomorrow. If you perform well, you may be allowed to graduate early, Fugaku continued. Don't worry, father. I will do my best to defeat him, Itachi said seriously. Tell me everything that happened today. I'll help you analyze it. Yes. In truth, there wasn't much to say. He had been taken down in a single move. But he still voiced his doubts. Fugaku frowned. Uchiha Shuriken Jutsu, and Shisui's body flicker technique. Shisui is likely training Shimura. Itachi couldn't help but ask, then why didn't Shisui tell me? Foolish. Fugaku scolded. This is Shisui's mission. Shimura is Danzō's grandson, do you think information about him can be leaked so easily? If Shisui had told you, it would have caused major trouble. I understand, father, Itachi said, bowing his head further. A shinobi must be careful with their words and actions. Always think before you speak, Fugaku admonished, then waved his hand dismissively. As for tomorrow's battle, your chances of winning are slim. But don't be discouraged, Uchiha's true strength doesn't lie in basic ninjutsu or taijutsu, but in the Sharingan. Speed alone isn't everything. Once you awaken your eyes, you will surpass Shimura Yami soon enough. After listening to Itachi's description and making his own deductions, Fugaku knew the gap between them was too wide to be closed in a short time. Go rest. Even if you lose tomorrow, you must display your talent and strength to the village. That way, you can graduate early. Yes. Returning to his room, Itachi lay in bed, replaying the memories sent back by his shadow clone. Sleep did not come easily. Hokage's office. Hokage-sama, these are the test papers of Uchiha Itachi and Shimura Yami, Kazama Shuaki said, placing the documents on the desk with a conflicted expression. Hiruzen, busy reviewing other reports, didn't notice his troubled look. He simply nodded and gestured for Shuaki to leave. Half an hour later, after finishing his paperwork, Hiruzen picked up the test papers, eager to assess the academic performance of the 2 students. As expected, Uchiha Itachi's paper was flawless. His level far exceeded that of an average first-year student. But when Hiruzen looked at Yami's test, he froze. What the hell is this? Yami had answered all the multiple-choice and fill-in-the-blank questions correctly, earning full marks. But the essay section, especially the last question. Bang! Hiruzen slammed his hand on the desk. I've been Hokage for 20 years, and my only accomplishment is banning casinos. Danzō, this is your fault. How did such a good child end up like this? You bastard! Meanwhile, in another location. Danzō, in the middle of arranging a new round of secret missions, suddenly sneezed twice. His expression darkened. Damn Sarutobi Hiruzen. He must be jealous that I have such an outstanding grandson. The night passed quickly. With the exams over, the academy was about to enter a month-long break, and the once lively campus had become quiet. Except for one place, the training grounds where the first-year students had tested the previous day. A row of tables had been set up along the edge of the clearing. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Danzō, and the two other elders sat behind them. A dozen shinobi stood around, including Uchiha Fugaku. Word had spread, and many others had come to watch. Konoha had never lacked geniuses, but this situation was different. One was a member of the Uchiha clan. The other was the grandson of Shimura Danzō. With such a background, their match had instantly become the talk of the village. Had it not been for many Jonin being away on missions, the audience would have been twice as large. At precisely 9 o'clock, Yami and Ataka stood 10 meters apart, just as they had yesterday. But this time, both were here in person. The referee had been changed from the Rukijnin Kazama Shoki to an Anbu in a cat-masked disguise. The battle rules are as follows, the Anbu announced in a cold voice. If one participant loses combat ability or the referee determines they can no longer continue, they will be declared the loser. Now, before we begin. No need. Yami interrupted him without hesitation. The Anbu frowned, his gaze turning cold, but before he could speak, he suddenly felt multiple killing intents lock onto him. His expression stiffened, and he quickly composed himself. This is the rule, Shimura. I already made the seal of confrontation with him yesterday. This is just a continuation of that fight, there's no need to be so formal. Fine. The Anbu reluctantly stepped back. Hiruzen smiled at Danzō. Danzō, your grandson is quite unique. Danzō, however, didn't even look at Hiruzen. No, your Asuma is still better. Hiruzen's smile vanished. Recently, his youngest son had been in a rebellious phase, arguing with him at home almost daily. It had become a major source of frustration. And now, Danzō had deliberately poked at his sore spot. Yuditen Koharu and Mitokedo Homura, seated nearby, struggled to hold back their laughter. These two old men had been bickering since childhood. Some things never changed. Chapter 16, Awakening the Sharingan? Yami looked at Ataka with a solemn expression. He not only needed to win this battle but had to do so without revealing too much of his true strength. According to the experience of countless reincarnators, if he displayed too much talent, he would attract Danzō's attention. Then, the so-called orthodox faction would regret their oversight, and Danzō would secretly scheme against him. No, wait, he was Danzō's grandson. That was fine. Yami's expression relaxed. The culprit turned out to be himself. What was there to fear? Itaki observed Yami's shifting expression with some confusion. However, before he could think further, the cat-masked Anbu announced the match. The battle begins. The Anbu's whistle sounded, and both moved simultaneously. One advanced. The other retreated. Yami gave chase, while Itaki evaded. Even as he moved to maintain distance, Itaki's hands remained active. His fingers trembled slightly, and in an instant, dozens of shuriken shot out. Each one was connected by nearly invisible silk threads. With a precise tug, the trajectories of the shuriken changed. Some continued to block Yami from the front, while others curved around from both sides, forming a massive net designed to trap him completely. The essence of the body flicker technique was not true teleportation. Rather, it used chakra to enhance one's physical speed dramatically. Since Ataka had trained with Uchiha Shisui, he naturally knew how to counter it. Many observing shinobi couldn't help but nod in approval. It had appeared. The Uchiha clan's shurikenjutsu. With the precision granted by the Sharingan and the chakra control that came with advanced mental acuity, the Uchiha clan had elevated shuriken techniques to an art form. They could manipulate them mid-flight using silk threads, creating unpredictable and near impossible to defend attacks. But, this attacker was still blind. Chief Fugaku has indeed raised an outstanding son, a Jonin sighed. Yes, another Uchiha Shisui in the making. Who knows what name he'll carve for himself in the future. As expected of Konoha's strongest clan, endless geniuses. Hearing the Jonin's praises, Fugaku almost smiled. He even used chakra to suppress the corners of his mouth from curling up. However, he failed to notice the four elders led by Hiruzen. None of them smiled. They simply watched with expressionless faces. On the battlefield, Yami and Ataka continued to maintain a certain distance. It seemed as if Ataka's strategy had worked, but something was off. Ataka's expression changed slightly. Yami suddenly sprinted forward again. Ataka instinctively pulled his threads to intercept, only to realize his kunao and shuriken had all been tangled together into a messy ball. Recalling Yami's seemingly erratic movements from before, realization struck. What had appeared to be random, aimless spinning was actually a deliberate strategy to entangle his threads. You think I let you jump around for so long because I was afraid? Yami smirked. I was just giving Shisui some face. But now, this farce ends. Swish. Yami activated the body flicker technique and instantly closed the distance. He launched a straight punch. Ataka instinctively raised his arms to block, but pain. A sharp, piercing sensation shot through his arms as his entire body was sent flying. The impact made Ataka feel as if he were facing a fully matured ninja, not a peer. Their physical strength wasn't even on the same level. Using the force of the blow, he flipped backward to regain distance. Ignoring the pain, he quickly formed hand seals. By the time he landed, only 2 seals remained. Tiger Ram. Fire release, Great Fireball technique. A massive fireball erupted from his mouth, rapidly expanding to 5 meters in diameter as it surged forward with intense heat waves. However, Yami had already predicted his move. The moment Ataka began forming seals, Yami and his shadow clone started forming their own. Boom! A cloud of smoke erupted as the clone appeared. However, its hand seals were different from Yami's. Fire release, Dragon Fire technique. Wind release, Great Breakthrough. The 2 jutsu merged. Explosion Wind Dance. In an instant, a powerful combination technique was formed. The wind fueled the flames, and the flames empowered the wind, amplifying each other exponentially. A raging fire dragon spun violently, roaring toward Ataka's incoming fireball. Boom! The fireball exploded upon impact, yet the fire dragon continued to surge forward. Ataka's pupils contracted sharply. He hadn't expected his great fireball technique to be overwhelmed so effortlessly. Under the boost from wind release, the fire dragon's speed increased rather than decreased. Its size also expanded rapidly. The roaring flames reflected in Ataka's eyes. There was no time to dodge. At the last moment. Earth release, Earth-style wall. A sturdy wall of earth abruptly rose from the ground, blocking the flames. When the fire dissipated, the earthen wall had crumbled into pieces, revealing the figure behind it. Uchiha Fugaku. The Uchiha clan leader stood with a solemn expression, gazing at Yami through the remnants of the wall. Ataka lost this battle, Shimura Yami. No, father. I haven't. Shut up. Fugaku suddenly turned, but as he looked at his son, his eyes widened in shock. Ataka's eyes were blood red. A single tomo hung in each pupil. Ataka, have you awakened the Sharingan? Fugaku's anger instantly vanished, replaced by astonishment. Before he could say another word, Ataka collapsed to the ground. Ding! The host's rival bond with Uchiha Ataka has reached the second stage. Reward, Uchiha bloodline, rich. Fugaku swiftly picked up his son and turned toward the Hokage's table. Hokage-sama, I need to take Ataka for medical treatment. I'll take my leave. Go, Fugaku, Sarutobi Hiruzen said, still shrouded beneath his bamboo hat. His expression remained unreadable. When he wakes, congratulate him on becoming a genin for me. Danz remained silent, his lowered head casting a shadow over his face. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Fugaku bowed slightly before vanishing with a body flicker technique, rushing toward Konoha Hospital. Watching them leave, Yami exhaled softly. It seems I won't have a chance to complete the reconciliation seal after all. To be continued. Chapter 17, Hiruzen's defense is broken. As Fugaku left, the battle was officially declared over. Hiruzen turned to leave, and the observing shinobi gradually dispersed. Meanwhile, Danz approached Yami, patted his shoulder, and, unable to contain his joy, let a smile slip. Though, on his face, it looked a bit unsettling. Yami, you did well, but don't get complacent. The cursed Uchiha awakened his Sharingan at this moment. Uchiha Ataka's strength will soon surge. You must continue working hard, or he'll catch up to you. Yami waved his hand dismissively. So what if he has the Sharingan? He thinks he can surpass me after losing to me. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. He'll only be chasing my back for the rest of his life. Dan's eye twitched. Where did this arrogant personality of his grandson come from? Shouldn't he be more like himself, reserved, cautious, a scheming old man? Dan's wanted to warn him about the terror of the Mangeki Sharingan, but this wasn't the time or place to discuss such things. Instead, he simply instructed Yami to wait for him at home that evening before hurriedly setting off after Sarutobi Hiruzen. At the Hokage's office, Dan's didn't bother knocking. He pushed the door open and strode inside. Hiruzen stood by the window, gazing over the village. Drop the act. There's no one else here, Dan sneered as he took a seat across from the Hokage's desk. I don't know what you're talking about, Hiruzen replied without even turning around. A child of 7, you and I both know what he'll become in the future. With Uchiha Shisui and now Uchiha Itachi, tell me, Hiruzen, is this still our Konoha, or will it become Uchiha's Konoha? Hiruzen's eyes darkened, and silence filled the office. A long, heavy sigh eventually broke the stillness. Dan's, the war isn't over yet. We need the Uchiha's strength. Dan sneered again. Hiruzen, you never change. Decades have passed, yet you still cling to the same old tactics. You want both honor and results. But that's fine. Your indecisiveness allows root to grow. And one day, my roots will break through the ground and take over the entire tree. Enough about Uchiha, Dan said. Let's talk about Yami. Hiruzen returned to his seat, his expression softening into that of the benevolent Hokage he portrayed before the public. Even with Uchiha Itachi's talent, your Yami defeated him effortlessly. His mastery of fire and wind release impressive. Hiruzen's keen eyes had caught many details from Yami's battle. In general, a ninjutsu clash was determined by chakra output and nature transformation proficiency. Judging by the scale of the jutsu used, Yami hadn't expended much chakra. His fire release, dragon fire technique and wind release, great breakthrough together barely exceeded the chakra cost of a great fireball technique. Yet, he had overpowered Itachi's great fireball technique and nearly shattered Fugaku's earth-style wall. This was purely due to nature transformation, the technique's quality was exceptionally high. What pleased Hiruzen even more was Yami's fighting style. Combination ninjutsu wasn't that his specialty? Hiruzen possessed no Kekii Genkai, nor did he wield yin-yang release techniques. Instead, he had mastered all 5 elemental releases, refining his nature transformation to the absolute limit and developing an array of combination jutsu. If the timing had been more appropriate, Hiruzen might have slammed the table, stood up, and declared, "This kid is just like me." Once his desire for talent took root, it became unstoppable. Hiruzen finally revealed his true intentions. Dan's, Yami is an exceptional talent. You can't train him properly. Let me train him. I guarantee he'll become the backbone of Konoha. In your dreams. Dan's expression twisted in anger as he slammed the table. The loud impact echoed outside the office. Yami is my grandson. I will handle his future myself. You don't need to meddle with your false benevolence. They had known each other for decades, Dan's understood Hiruzen's ways. This was brainwashing. If Yami fell for it, he'd turn into one of those will of fire fanatics, constantly chanting about Konoha's bright future. That was unacceptable. Hiruzen frowned. Dan's, your nature is too dark. A talent like Yami mustn't be ruined by your twisted ideology. He is still a child. He needs proper guidance. If he stays with me, I will teach him how to become an excellent shinobi. Dan's was so infuriated that he cursed outright. Excellent shinobi? None of your 3 disciples have turned out right. One indulges in women, one is a gambler, and the last is addicted to drugs. 2 of them have even abandoned Konoha. And you expect me to entrust Yami to you? Hiruzen's face turned red. Lies could be ignored. But the truth? The truth cut deep. His 3 disciples were his greatest failure. And Dan's had struck precisely at his weakest point. And worse. Dan's had insulted his intelligence. For years, Hiruzen had always prided himself on outmaneuvering Dan's with wit. But today, the roles were reversed. You really won't hand over Yami to me? Hiruzen asked. Hiruzen, I am his grandfather. Dan's, you'll regret this. Bang. Hiruzen stormed out of the office, slamming the door shut. He didn't realize what had happened until he was halfway down the hallway. Wait. This is my office. Danzō should be the one leaving. Realizing this, he quickly turned around, pushed the door open, and glared at Danzō. Danzō. This is my office. You should be the one leaving. Inside, Danzō was trying not to laugh. For years, he was always the one storming out. But today, Hiruzen was the one who lost his temper. Of course, on the surface, Danzō remained composed, the ever-calculating leader of Root. Had he laughed now, Hiruzen might have truly snapped. You don't need to worry about Yami's future, Danzō said calmly as he finally stood to leave. Hiruzen sighed heavily. He envied Danzō. At least Danzō had a grandson. Meanwhile, his own son, Sarutobi Shinichika, had been married for years but still had no children. Always off on missions with his wife. And as for his youngest son, still single. No. This couldn't go on. Shinichika. Hiruzen called. Moments later, an enbu in a dog-masked uniform entered the office. Hiruzen locked eyes with him and issued a command in an undeniable tone. Starting today, you're on leave. Go home and work on giving me a grandson. Until you do, don't bother returning to enbu. Sarutobi Shinichika. Chapter 18, Not His Match. Inside a private room at Konoha Hospital, Itaka had regained consciousness. He hadn't suffered any serious injuries, only his fist had been fractured from striking Yami. The reason he fainted was that his body couldn't withstand the sudden surge in mental power caused by awakening the Sharingan. It was a natural self-protection mechanism. After resting for a while, he had woken up. At that moment, Shisui arrived. The day before, Shisui had heard about the duel between Itaki and Yami, but an urgent mission had suddenly come up. He had hurriedly completed it and rushed back. Yet, he was still too late. He had chased all the way to Konoha Hospital, only to find Itaki lying in bed. When Itaki opened his eyes, the first thing he saw were two familiar faces, both filled with concern. Father, brother Shisui. Itaki, you're awake. Shisui smiled. I did my best to rush back, but I was still a step too late. I heard it was an exciting match. Don't be discouraged, it's normal to lose to Yami-kun. If you keep working hard, you'll definitely catch up to him one day. That's right, Uchiha Fugaku nodded approvingly. Winning or losing at this stage doesn't matter. More importantly, you've awakened the Sharingan. That alone is a remarkable achievement. Awakening the Sharingan at 7 years old was extremely rare in the post-Sengoku era. The last person to do so had been Shisui himself. And, Itaki was even half a year younger than Shisui had been at the time. As expected of his son. Yet, despite their words of encouragement, Itaki remained silent, his expression somewhat blank. Fugaku considered this for a moment before excusing himself from the room. Although his son was usually calm and mature, Fugaku knew that, deep down, Itaki was still an Uchiha, proud and ambitious. Losing to a shinobi from outside the clan was undoubtedly a heavy blow. There was nothing more he could say. Perhaps Shisui, who was closer in age, could get through to him. With Fugaku gone, the atmosphere in the ward lightened slightly. At least, Itaki finally spoke. Brother Shisui, did you teach Shimura Yami the Uchiha Shuriken technique and body flicker technique? Shisui blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected that to be Itaki's first question. Still, he nodded. Yes. Itaki's expression changed slightly. He sat up in bed. Since you're his teacher, how big is the gap between us? Shisui smiled wryly. He didn't answer. He simply shook his head. Itaki clenched his fists. Now that I've awakened the Sharingan, do I still not have a chance to win? With the Sharingan, his mental strength had increased drastically. And since chakra was a combination of physical and mental energy, his overall chakra reserves had also improved. Itaki even wanted to challenge Yami again. Yet, Shisui still believed he would lose? Itaki. Shisui sighed. The Sharingan is not omnipotent. Seeing the stubborn determination in Itaki's gaze, Shisui softened his voice. You've only just awakened your Sharingan. You haven't mastered it yet. Besides, a one-tomo Sharingan isn't all that powerful, it simply enhances perception. Even without the Sharingan, Yami's dynamic vision is already terrifying. You still have no chance of winning. Itaki's eyes darkened. Is Shimura Yami really that strong? At the age of 4, he had followed his father to the battlefield and killed enemy shinobi with his own hands. And Shimura Yami? A spoiled clan heir, notorious for lazing around the village, eating and drinking at restaurants without paying. Yes, without paying. Yet Shisui still thought Itake couldn't win? Itake. Shisui looked directly at him and spoke in a serious tone. Yami-kun is far more terrifying than you think. And to be honest, I have nothing left to teach him. Itake's eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. To Itake, Shisui was the strongest shinobi he knew, stronger even than his father. Shisui had mastered numerous ninjutsu, was a prodigy in taijutsu, and possessed the strongest 3 Tomo Sharingan. And yet, even he claimed he was no longer qualified to teach Yami? If even Shisui wasn't qualified, then who in the village was? The Hokage? It's not that Yami-kun's strength has surpassed mine, Shisui clarified. It's his talent and his learning speed. Some things I probably shouldn't tell you. But, as an exception, I'll share them with you. You mustn't tell anyone, not even clan leader Fugaku. Shisui's face grew serious. Itake straightened. I understand, Shisui. I won't tell anyone. Shisui exhaled. He learns too fast. In just 1 week, he mastered the Uchiha Shuriken technique. In a single month, he learned all my fire release ninjutsu. 1 month after that, he completely mastered the body flicker technique. After 6 months, in a pure kenjutsu duel, we fought to a draw. From that day on, I never taught him again. Yami doesn't need skills or jutsu. He only needs time to grow. Silence. Shimura Yami knows swordsmanship. Itake's voice was hollow. He knew how strong Shisui's kenjutsu was. With body flicker and genjutsu, Shisui could eliminate an enemy with a single strike. Yet Yami held his own? No. Shisui corrected him. Swordsmanship isn't just something he knows. It's his strongest weapon. Complete silence. Itake sat motionless. Did this mean he wasn't even worthy of Yami taking him seriously? Shisui looked at his expression and sighed. Itake was extraordinarily talented. Among his peers, no one could match him. But fate had put him in the same generation as Shimura Yami. Fortunately, with the Sharingan, Itake still had hope of catching up. After a long silence, seeing that Itake had finally processed everything, Shisui spoke again. Itake, even though you've awakened the Sharingan, there's something very important you need to remember. His voice was more serious than before. Itake frowned. What is it? Shisui met his gaze. Until your body is fully developed, use the Sharingan as little as possible. Otherwise, it will cause irreversible damage to your body. Elsewhere, in the village, on a quiet, grassy field, 2 figures lay side by side, gazing at the sky. The young man murmured softly. Honestly, awakening the Sharingan too early isn't necessarily a good thing. Chapter 19, Tsutsuki Toki? Why? Izumi asked curiously. She had also been present at the duel that morning. However, upon seeing so many Genin and even the Hokage in attendance, she had hesitated to approach and instead hid under a large tree, quietly watching from afar. The 2 of them had been discussing Itake awakening his Sharingan, and Izumi had spoken with clear envy. For any Uchiha, awakening the Sharingan was always an important milestone. But looking at Shimura Yami, it seemed like she didn't think it was such a good thing. Because it's too early, Yami replied, reaching out to ruffle Izumi's soft black hair. Izumi had been growing her hair since childhood. It was long, smooth, and had a wonderful texture. Izumi pouted and swatted Yami's hand away. She had spent so much time caring for her hair that morning, and in an instant, it was ruined. Yami chuckled and continued explaining, there are many benefits to awakening the Sharingan, but we're still kids. Our bodies haven't fully developed yet, and we're in a period of rapid growth. If the Sharingan is awakened too early, it disrupts the balance between mind and body, essentially forcing our bodies to endure unnecessary strain. Overuse can lead to serious consequences, even illness. Yami strongly suspected that Uchiha Itake's frail health in the future was directly related to awakening the Sharingan and later the Manjiki too early. The human cells in this world were 3 times more active than in his previous life, leading to faster development, but even so, awakening the Sharingan at 6 or 7 years old was simply too extreme. It was an undeniable overload. Throughout his time at the Ninja Academy, Yami had observed that attack was quite strong and didn't seem sickly at all. It must have been that, as a child, he didn't understand the importance of preserving his pupil power, so he used it recklessly and paid the price as he got older. Hearing his serious words, Izumi shrank back slightly, curling up into a small ball. Her envy of Uchiha Taka disappeared instantly. Then, her curiosity returned. Yami, how do you know so much? The elders in the clan never mentioned anything like this. In fact, they always tell us to awaken our Sharingan as soon as possible. Shimura Yami answered calmly, because my old man said so. He's the Hokage's advisor, he knows things. I see, Izumi said, nodding as if everything made perfect sense. After a while, lunchtime arrived. Yami took Izumi to the famous Ichiraku ramen in Konoha. Satsuki Ichiraku? That was just a joke. Toki was simply an ordinary old man who made ramen. Well, calling him an old man might not be accurate, there were still more than 10 years before the main story began. At most, he was in his 30s. But his cooking skills were truly top-notch. The Shimura and Uchiha clans were both frequent customers at Ichiraku ramen. Every time, Yami would order a large bowl of shashir ramen with 2 extra croquettes. Izumi, having a much smaller appetite, would be satisfied with a regular bowl. But this time, Yami noticed something interesting. A girl about their age was in the kitchen, kneading dough by hand. When adding water, she carefully poured it in little by little, afraid of overdoing it. Toki, turning around unintentionally, noticed Yami watching his daughter. Smiling, he introduced her, "This is my daughter, Ayam. She doesn't have the talent to become a ninja like you two, so she didn't attend the academy. Instead, she's learning the family trade here in the shop." Ayam shyly hid behind Toki, nodding slightly at Yami and Izumi. In her mind, she was thinking this boy is really handsome. Truth be told, Yami's parents had excellent genes. His mother had a classic oval-shaped face. As for his father, don't let Dan's current appearance fool you. His face looking like a battlefield was the result of countless injuries. Back in his youth, he had been one of the most handsome boys in the nearby villages. He could even make Tsunade and Shizuan blush. So naturally, Yami's father had been quite good-looking. With the best features from both parents, optimized and refined, Yami was destined to be a walking disaster once he grew up. After finishing their meal, Yami escorted Izumi back to the Uchiha compound before heading home to reflect on the day's gains. Defeating Itaki in such a decisive manner had brought him considerable benefits, especially since most of the spectators had been elite Genin or high-ranking shinobi. Their strong impressions of him had resulted in highly valuable rewards. Host has established a bond with Gekkei 8. Reward, 3 standard Chunin chakras. Host has established a bond with Sarutobi Shinashuk. Reward, Fire chakra nature transformation, excellent. Host has established a bond with Raid Namayashi. Reward, Space Ninjutsu talent, 1/3. More than 10 people had been present as bystanders, each providing first stage rewards. But the most precious one was undoubtedly the Space Ninjutsu talent. This was the second space talent fragment he had obtained. The first fragment, also 1/3, had come as a second stage reward from his bond with Uchiha Izumi. Raid Namayashi. Shimura Yami recalled that he was a special Genin in the village, known for serving as one of the 4th Hokage's personal guards alongside Shiranui Genma and Iwashi Tatami. The 3 of them were capable of jointly activating the Flying Thunder God formation, so it made sense that he possessed spatial talent. Still, Yami was surprised to receive a space-related reward at the first stage of their bond. It seemed today was truly his lucky day. With just one more fragment, he would finally be able to attempt the Flying Thunder God technique. Without the power of the 6 paths, almost no one could threaten a shinobi who had mastered Flying Thunder God, except through highly specific countermeasures. Status panel. Name, Shimura Yami. Gender, male. Age, 7 years old. Date of birth, April 1st, year 46, Konoha calendar. Chakra attributes, Fire, Ultimate, Wind, Ultimate, Earth, Genius, Water, Genius, Thunder, Genius, Yin, Genius, Yang, Genius. Total chakra, 5 cards, 1 card 5 standard Genin chakras. Chakra control talent, Genius. Mastered ninjutsu, 3 basic techniques, proficient, 5 basic nature releases, various levels. Nature transformation, wind release, mastery, fire release, proficient, earth release, proficient, water release, proficient. Special talents: father's expectations, mother's love, senjua bloodline, thin, underdevelopment, swordsmanship genius, stealth mastery, ninja world darkness, mother-in-law's expectation, space ninjutsu talent, 2/3, Uchiha bloodline, rich. Evaluation, Jonin level with weaknesses, focus on leveraging your strengths in battle. Yami was admiring the impressive status panel he had built up over the past year when there was a sudden noise at the gate. Dan stepped into the courtyard, holding a ninja forehead protector in his hand. Chapter 20, Rewards. Yami, congratulations. Dan handed the forehead protector to Yami's small hands, his smile unwavering since stepping into the room. From today onward, you're officially a ninja. Dan encouraged him, although you're not the youngest Jonin, times are different now. You have the potential to become the youngest Jonin in the village. Keep working hard. The youngest Jonin in Konoha's history was Hotake Kakashi, who achieved the rank at just 12 years old. However, Yami had both the talent and background to surpass him. Yami held the Konoha forehead protector, contemplating where to wear it. His forehead wasn't particularly wide, so he didn't want to wear it on his head and ruin his appearance. Just then, the system prompt chimed in at the perfect moment. Host has established a bond with Konoha village, acquired organization status, Jonin, and obtained the special state, leaning against a big tree. Effect, within the land of fire, training speed increases by 20%, and chakra recovery speed increases by 20%. The effect strengthens as rank advances. Congratulations, host, for becoming a Konoha Jonin and reaching the first stage of mother's love. Do you wish to claim your reward? Note, rewards expire after 24 hours. Not yet. Silently responding in his mind, Yami looked up at Dan and grinned. Old man, what's the point of being the youngest Jonin? If I'm aiming for something, it should be to become the youngest Hokage. Originally, he hadn't cared much about formal affiliation. As the true prince of Konoha, even Jonin wouldn't dare act arrogantly around him, lest they be targeted by Dan. But upon receiving the system's notification, Yami immediately changed his stance. No one in this world could be completely trusted, only his own strength was truly reliable. Good. Dan's lone eye gleamed with excitement. You have ambition, as expected of my grandson. The position of Hokage should have belonged to our Shimura clan. Don't worry, I'll become Hokage as soon as possible to pave the way for you. Dan calculated that he could still work for another 20 years. By then, Yami would be under 30, at the peak of his career, just the right age to assume the role of Hokage. Then Yami would have children and grandchildren. With proper grooming, perhaps Hokage could become a hereditary position, much like the daimyo. The thought ignited a fire in Dan's heart, making him want to overthrow Sarutobi Hiruzen immediately. But that was merely a fantasy. For now, the most pressing matter was arranging Yami's next steps. Dan calmed his excitement and spoke in a serious tone. Now that you're a Jonin, Konoha's tradition dictates that a Jonin instructor and 2 teammates must be assigned to you. But your situation in Uchiha attack is unique. Only the 2 of you graduated early, and all the teams for this year's graduates have already been formed. I'm not teaming up with Uchiha Atake. Yami immediately shook his head like a rattle. That would be a disaster. In the original timeline, Uchiha Atake had awakened his Sharingan a year later than this, and the catalyst had been the death of his teammate. Then you won't team up with him. Dan nodded slightly. Let Hiruzen deal with Uchiha Atake. You'll train at route for a while, and I'll arrange your Jonin instructor and teammates later. Fine by me. Yami agreed without hesitation. It was the perfect opportunity to farm rewards from the members of Root. After finalizing the plan, Yami and Dan had dinner together. Later, using an excuse, Yami retreated to his room to claim his rewards. It was a shame the system only gave a 24-hour window. Otherwise, he would have saved up all his attributes and maxed them out before claiming them, potentially reaching the limit break threshold in one go. And what was limit break? At the very least, it meant standing at the level of Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. Unfortunately, the system was too well designed and wouldn't allow such an exploit. In fact, Yami had considered staying in the academy until he maxed out all his attributes before leaving, but after careful thought, he dismissed the idea. He couldn't limit himself just because of a single talent effect. The academy had too few people to interact with. Only by stepping into the real world as a shinobi could he truly build connections and advance his strength. That was why he chose to graduate now. What did talent matter? With enough effort, he could still reach the limit break level. System, claim rewards. Yami muttered in his heart. The system didn't respond. It wasn't particularly intelligent, only capable of answering basic rules-related questions. Instead, the rewards were quietly distributed. A wave of warmth spread through Yami's body. His cell activity and chakra vitality surged by an entire level. And his total chakra began increasing rapidly. Checking his system panel, he watched as the numbers climbed. 5.2 cards. 5.7 cards. 6.2 cards. 6.5 cards. 7 cards. After about 10 minutes, the numbers finally settled at 9 cards. Meanwhile, in his special talents, his Senju bloodline, thin, under development, had changed to Senju bloodline, normal. But as for wood release, there wasn't a trace of it. Many people mistakenly believed that wood release and the Senju bloodline were inherently linked. But in reality, that wasn't true. The Senju were the Senju, and wood release was wood release. Across thousands of years of history, the only shinobi to naturally awaken wood release had been Senju Hashirama. Even whether the Sage of Six Paths could use wood release was debatable. It wasn't the Senju who were special, it was Hashirama himself. No one knew exactly how that monster had created such an absurd Kekkei Genkai, one that even connected to the god tree itself. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Yami's eyes, making him instinctively cover them with his hands. A warm liquid trickled down his face. When he pulled his hands away, he saw streaks of blood tears staining his arms. And when he opened his eyes again, Yami's pupils had turned a deep, blood-red color. Within each eye, a single tomo had appeared. To be continued.
Thanks for listening.